Chapter 544. He is not worthy. He doesn't deserve it, Lu Tongjia murmured softly. Her voice was low and hoarse, but it was filled with pain. That was no longer a simple grudge. That kind of hatred frightened Su Qingsang, and the anger on her face dissipated a lot. Lu Tongjia's seat was close to the balcony. She stood up and stood next to the wall. At this moment, she turned her face away in discomfort and pressed on the position of her heart. Mrs. Hua. Lu Tongjia was obviously not in a good state. Su Qingsang took 2 steps forward. He stretched out his hand to help her. Go away. Lu Tongjia didn't accept her kindness. She looked at Su Qingsang with resentment in her eyes. I don't need you to pretend to be a good person here. You and Hu Jinyao are the same. You're all the same. Su Qingsang stood there without moving. She just didn't understand. Thinking of Hu Jinyao, who was still lying unconscious on the bed, she looked at Lu Tongjia again. Mrs. Hua, please mind your words. Hu Jinyao is your son. What? Do you think my words are unpleasant? I'm not wrong. Lu Tongjia sneered. Her expression was one of mockery and hatred. It was genuine hatred. That kind of gaze was frightening. Son. I would rather not have such a son. She patted her heart, unable to hide the pain on her face. Have you always wanted to know why I dislike him so much? Lu Tongjia straightened her back and stared at Su Qingsang. Her voice was cold. Do you think it's strange that I hate him? You don't understand, do you? Why is it that even though he is my son, I would rather not have him? Furthermore, do you think that I'm being unreasonable and not behaving like a mother? Su Qingsang didn't respond to Lu Tongjia's questions. She was curious, very curious. However, no matter how much she wanted to know, she wouldn't ask Lu Tongjia or Hu Jinyao. That must not be a good thing. She thought about everything that had happened to Hu Jinyao during this period of time. Those things should not have happened to him. She had also thought that if Hu Jinyao didn't tell her about those nightmares, she wouldn't ask about them. One day, when he was willing to talk, she would ask him again. It didn't matter even if he didn't want to say it. Who didn't have a past? Who didn't have some injuries that they couldn't face? She used to have it too. She was lucky that she got out of it. Because she met Hu Jinyao, the darkness in her heart was turned over. But Hu Jinyao didn't have nightmares in the middle of the night. He was still suffering. Looking at Lu Tongjia now, she really wanted to know. She didn't want to see Hu Jinyao suffer like he did now. She watched as he lost his usual high-spirited demeanor. She watched as he felt pain because of the hurt from his family. Her heart ached. Why? Her voice was very soft, as if she was afraid to disturb Lu Tongjia's desire to talk. Lu Tongjia stood up straight and moved away from the wall. Step by step, she walked to the sofa in the room and sat down again. Her gaze was fixed on an unknown point in the void. The hatred in her eyes was very obvious, but there was also a bit of blankness and emptiness that she herself did not notice. Because I hate him. You don't know how much I hate him. Lu Tongjia's eyes were red when she said this. There were tears in her eyes, and the emotions in her eyes were tumbling. He killed my son, he killed my daughter. He was so vicious when he was so young. At that time, I really thought that I would rather not have this son. Su Qingsang's eyes widened. For a moment, she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. What did you say? Ha. Lu Tongjia looked at her with a bit of disdain in her eyes. Su Qingsang, haven't you thought about it? The Hua family is such a big family. Other than me and Hu Jinyao's father, Su Qingsang blinked, as if she just remembered it at that moment. Hua Mingliang had 2 sons and a daughter, and Hua Mingmei had a son and a daughter. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that his granduncle, Hua Yangyuan, had 2 sons. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that his granduncle, Hua Yangyuan, had 2 sons. The elder son had a son and a daughter, and the younger son had 2 sons. His grandaunt, Hua Yangshu, had 3 sons. Almost all of the previous sons had 2 sons. It seemed that Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia were the only ones in the entire Hua family who had only 1 child. A big family like the Hua family, especially a family that thought that having many children was a blessing, didn't seem to be normal. Su Qingsang's heart was suddenly in her throat. She looked at Lu Tongjia, her mind full of doubts. In addition to the doubts, she inexplicably had a bad feeling. She suddenly didn't dare to face what Lu Tongjia was going to say next. It wasn't that she didn't believe Hua Jinyao, but she knew that it must be a very painful past. Lu Tongjia seemed to see the fear on Su Qingsang's face. She sneered, and the hatred in her eyes didn't diminish at all. Instead, because of the bad things that had happened, her face was quite ugly. She closed her eyes. Her eyes were a little red. It wasn't a good thing for her to be too emotional. She raised her hand to cover her heart. She gently breathed to calm herself down. Su Qingsang didn't rush her, nor did she rush her. She was waiting for Lu Tongjia to calm down. It was impossible for Lu Tongjia to calm down. It had been more than 10 years, and she still hadn't calmed down. She looked somewhere, and her expression was a bit nostalgic. I had 3 children. Before Hua Jinyao, he had an older brother named Hua Jinkai. After him, he had a younger sister named Hua Wushuang. When Lu Tongjia said the name Hua Wushuang, tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Her daughter, the daughter she had wanted for so long. Until now, the pain of losing her son and daughter had been tormenting her day and night at all times. The more she felt sad, the more she hated Hua Jinyao, and the more she couldn't forgive him. But they were all killed by Hua Jinyao. That's impossible. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, almost whispering. She had been married to Hua Jinyao for almost a year. She knew what kind of person Hua Jinyao was. She believed that Hua Jinyao would never hurt his brothers and sisters. Impossible. Lu Tongjia sneered, and the hatred in her eyes became more and more obvious. She also hoped that it was impossible. She also hoped that Hua Jinyao didn't say and do those things at that time. But in fact, Lu Tongjia could be said to have lived a very happy life. Her starting point was much higher than the average person's. The Lu family was considered a respectable family in Rong City. Although it wasn't as rich as the Hua family or even the Li family, it was still the only daughter of the Lu family. But as the only daughter of the Lu family, she was also spoiled since she was a child. Her father, mother, and brother all doted on her and followed her lead. When she grew up and went to college, she met Hua Mingguang by chance. Hua Mingguang was the eldest son of the Hua family. He took over the family business at an early age, and his every move was like a successful man. Lu Tongjia fell in love with Hua Mingguang at first sight. Luckily, Hua Mingguang liked her too. For Lu Tongjia, this was the best piece of news she could have ever heard. The two of them decided to get married not long after they started dating. Old Master Hua was not picky about family background. Not to mention that Lu Tongjia's family background was not bad. They were a good match, and the two of them had feelings for each other. Moreover, the Hua family was strict. Old Master Hua was very loyal to his wife, and used this to restrain his children. Even though Lu Tongjia was only a college student at that time, she felt quite happy. Before she graduated, Lu Tongjia married Hua Mingguang. Not long after she graduated, she gave birth to her eldest son, Hua Jinkai. She firmly sat on the position of the young madam of the Hua family. Less than 2 years after she gave birth to Hu Jinkai, she gave birth to Hu Jinyao. At that time, she and Hu Mingguang were very close. But after giving birth to 2 sons, she was a little unsatisfied. She liked daughters, and so did Hu Mingguang. She wanted to have another daughter, but for several years, she didn't get her wish. When Hu Jinyao was 8 years old, she finally got pregnant again. Lu Tongjia prayed to her grandparents, prayed to God, and prayed to Buddha. She only hoped that the child in her belly was a daughter. After all, she had 2 sons, and she really wanted a daughter. She also felt that she was really lucky. Whatever she asked for came. She wanted a daughter, and a daughter came. That year, Lu Tongjia gave birth to 3 children. 11-year-old Hu Jinkai, 9-year-old Hu Jinyao, and a newborn daughter. She had a son and a daughter, and a husband who loved her deeply. Her father-in-law and mother-in-law were both kind. They never said anything about making things difficult for the younger generation. Lu Tongjia really felt that she was the happiest person in the world. Especially Hu Wuxuang. She wasn't as naughty as Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao when they were young. Hu Wuxuang perfectly combined the advantages of her parents' appearance. She was cute and cute. She liked to call her mother and brother in a childish voice. She was both obedient and sensible. Lu Tongjia really felt that her life was perfect. But who knew? Accidents always came so quickly. Sometimes she wondered if God saw that the first half of her life was too good and too smooth, so he wanted her to suffer some hardships. That kind of suffering was almost fatal to her. When Hu Jinyao was 12 years old, old Master Hua's wife suddenly passed away. Her death was so sudden that no one expected it. After all, the old lady seemed to be such a healthy person. Like old Master Hua, the old lady was kind and benevolent. As soon as she passed away, all her children and grandchildren were sad. Plus, the Hua family's status in Rong City. Many people came to pay their respects. Some of them were business people, some were relatives and friends of the Hua family, and some had benefited from the Hua family in the past. They wanted to burn incense for the old lady. Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao were fine. They were both teenagers and had grown up. Naturally, they could keep watch. But Hu Wuxuang was different. She was less than 4 years old. How could she stand watching for the whole day? She stayed in the morning hall. Besides, there were so many people, and they could only hear the sad sounds every day. It was inevitable that she was scared, so she cried every day. Later, her voice became hoarse from crying. Lu Tongjia felt sorry for her daughter, and old Master Hua also felt sorry for his granddaughter. At that time, Hua Manzi was already born. But Hu Wuxuang was very cute and sweet. She had lived with old Master Hua since she was a child, so their relationship was naturally special. Old Master Hua loved his granddaughter, so he asked her not to keep watch every day. Every time a guest came to pay their respects, he asked the nanny to carry Hu Wuxuang out. Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao couldn't avoid it. After 7 days of watching, the 2 brothers lost a lot of weight. When the old lady's funeral was over, Hu Wuxuang, who couldn't go out and was always locked up at home, was bored. She was still too young to understand what death meant. She only felt that, like her mother said, her grandmother had gone to another world. That world was called heaven, and heaven was beautiful. When the funeral was over, Hu Wuxuang couldn't sit still anymore. She begged Hu Jinkai and Hu Jinyao to take her out to play. Both of them loved their little sister very much. They also thought that Hu Wuxuang had been locked up at home during this period of time. The 2 brothers didn't think too much about it. Plus, they always took Hu Wuxuang out to play. Their family didn't worry about it. At that time, Hu Jinkai was already 14 years old. He was more than 1.7 meters tall and didn't look like a child. Hua Jinyao was the same. Although he was only 12 years old, he was already 1.6 meters tall. The two brothers took Hua Wushuang out together. Hua Wushuang was only a little over 4 years old. Her favorite thing was to go to the amusement park and play on the merry-go-round. Naturally, the two brothers agreed to their little sister's request. The three siblings went to the amusement park together. The two brothers accompanied Hua Wushuang to play on the merry-go-round 3 times. When they were about to leave, Hua Wushuang saw the pictures on the haunted house. Although she was small, she was very brave. No matter how Hua Jinyao tried to persuade her, she decided to go to the haunted house. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao were both grown up, so they weren't afraid. Therefore, the two of them held Hua Wushuang's hand and walked into the haunted house together. However, as soon as they entered the haunted house, an accident happened. Hua Jinkai and his sister always went out with a chauffeur. Hua Wushuang liked to be comfortable, so every time she went out, she would take the RV. There was a refrigerator in the car, and there were all kinds of snacks and drinks for her. It was also convenient for her to lie down in the car and rest when she was tired. The Hua family had a high status and reputation in Rong City. Coupled with their relationship with Hua Yangyuan and Hua Yangxiu, ordinary people didn't dare to mess with them. However, that day, Hua Jinkai and his sister were unlucky. A fugitive happened to escape to Rong City. This man had just committed robbery and murder in a neighboring city. The leader of the gang was called De, who was a national A-level wanted criminal. He was a national wanted criminal, so he naturally wanted to run away as soon as possible. However, before he ran away, he wanted to do one more job and make some money before leaving. Before he came, he had already gathered a few people who were not afraid of death like him. They all had criminal records. The 4 of them decided to do something big together. When the time came, they would escape to the ends of the earth. At that time, they had already been in Rong City for a few days, and they were living a life of hiding. They hadn't thought about what they were going to do. Chapter 545. At that time, the amusement park was much more prosperous than it was now. At that time, Rong City had just been developed, and the amusement park was built in the suburbs. There were also some undeveloped bungalows nearby. De and his 3 accomplices were hiding in one of the bungalows. When the Hua family's RV was parked in front of the amusement park, one of Da's accomplices, Liang, happened to come out to buy cigarettes. He saw it immediately. After all, the brand of the RV was so big that it was very eye-catching. Not only the RV, but also the 3 children of the Hua family, who were dressed in fancy clothes. The man's eyes lit up when he saw the RV, which was worth millions of yuan. He went back and told De about it, and they all felt that their chance had come. They looked at the young masters and young ladies who were so weak. No matter who it was, they had kidnapped them. Why couldn't they just ask their parents to pay the ransom? How rich could they be if they could drive their children out of the amusement park in a RV? They were all outlaws and daring, so they wanted to do it right away after making the decision. Thinking of what they had seen, they became even more daring. They made up their minds almost immediately. They had to do it right away. After all, the longer they waited, the more trouble it would cause. They didn't take Hua Jinkai's group seriously. They were just a few kids. De had been staying at the amusement park for the past few days, using the tourists to cover his tracks. When he heard the news from Liang, he immediately made a plan. He was a person with a criminal record. This time, he had made thorough preparations. After making the plan, they bought tickets and entered the amusement park. De was in charge of the plan, and the other 3 acted. They were still thinking about how to kidnap the kids first. Unexpectedly, the young masters and young ladies went into the haunted house by themselves. De felt that it was like someone had sent him a pillow when he wanted to take a nap. He immediately changed his plan. He decided to do it in the haunted house. Therefore, when Hu Jinkai and the others entered the haunted house, Wu Wuxuang was curious about the ghosts inside. Then she was scared. She was scared, and soon after, she cried and begged to go out. The two brothers of the Hu family, of course, wanted to take her out immediately. What they didn't expect was that two more ghosts suddenly appeared in front of the three of them. Hu Wuxuang and Hu Jinkai were both taken aback by her sudden appearance. Just as he was about to leave, he didn't expect two more ghosts to appear behind him. The two brothers didn't expect the haunted house to be so realistic. They looked at Hu Wuxuang, who was crying because of the appearance of these ghosts. The two brothers were very nervous. They coaxed Hu Wuxuang while thinking of taking her away. Neither of them had thought that these ghosts were actually villains in disguise. All they wanted to do was to comfort their little sister. However, while the two brothers were coaxing them, De and the other three, who had been standing behind them, easily knocked them out. Because all of this had happened in the haunted house, and it had happened in the dark corner. Therefore, no one noticed it at all. Even if someone noticed it, they would only think that it was a prank from the amusement park. Who would have thought that there would be someone so crazy on such a bright day? De and the other three brought Hu Jinkai and the others out of the amusement park. They hadn't gone far yet. The most dangerous place was also the safest place. They were very familiar with the area, and the nearby bungalow was going to be demolished sooner or later. Not many people walked this way, so the four kidnappers brought the Hu siblings back to the bungalow. De was a ruthless man. He was wanted all over the country because he had killed many people. Now that he was going to make money, he wouldn't let the little fat sheep he had his eyes on escape. He tied up the three siblings tightly and gagged their mouths. He didn't give them a chance to scream or run away. It was so easy that De didn't feel any sense of accomplishment. De was a man of experience. No matter what, he was an experienced man. He wouldn't let things go wrong at the last moment. He asked his three men to keep an eye on the Hu siblings, while he tried to find out the identity of these children. Of course, he didn't need to. When they woke up, he would be able to find out everything. However, De didn't like to do things that he wasn't sure of. It was better to find out the truth. He searched the three of them. It was a coincidence that the two brothers went out to play with their sister. They didn't bring their phones because they said they were going out to play with their sister. Only Hu Jinyao had an SLR camera with him to take pictures of his sister. De casually rummaged through it and found a family photo of his family. Some of them were taken at a banquet held by his family. De didn't know Hu Mingguang, but someone else did. The Hu family had published an obituary about the old lady's death. His other man, Chen Si, was a native of Rong City. He not only knew Hu Mingguang, but he also knew that he was the richest man in Rong City. He was a super rich man. Putting everything else aside, the Hu family was the one who was planning to develop the undeveloped bungalows. Chen Si looked at the photo and told him who Hu Mingguang was. De was overjoyed. He felt that this was a gift from the heavens. He thought he would kidnap a random child, but he didn't expect to kidnap the Hu family, the richest man in Rong City. The richest man in Rong City. How much money did he have? De felt that he couldn't just let it go. He just wanted to ask for some ransom, but it seemed that it wouldn't work. He had to extort a large sum of money from the Hu family so that they could live comfortably for the rest of their lives. The four of them discussed. 10 million was too little. They thought that a family like the Hu family would at least have a few 100 million. It was too easy to give them 100 million to spend. De was even more ruthless. 3 lives. 50 million each. 150 million for 3 children. With a target, the next step was much easier. There was an experienced man, so he made the next plan as soon as possible. He asked Chen Si to buy a few anonymous SIM cards, and then he used the SLR camera to take pictures of Hu Jinyao and his sister. If these rascals didn't wake up, she would send this photo to the Hu family. After that, they felt that this bungalow wasn't the most suitable place. After all, they didn't have much time. If he wanted to avoid being discovered by the Hu family, he had to stay far away. It was a coincidence. Less than an hour to the east of the amusement park was the coastline of Rome City. There were many newly built ports there. They planned to pick a port and stay there. When the money came, he would take it and leave. Chapter 546. The 3 siblings were taken to a car. They directly took these important hostages to a warehouse on the dock. As soon as they arrived, they dropped them off. Hu Jinkai woke up. He was a few years older than the others, and his body was in better shape than that of an average teenager. As soon as he woke up, he noticed that something was wrong. Looking at his brother and sister lying unconscious on the ground, he instantly realized what was going on. Hu Jinkai was shocked. His great-uncle was the governor of the province, and his uncle was the commander of the military. He couldn't believe that someone would dare to kidnap the children of the Hu family. "Who are you? Don't you know who we are? Let us go." Hu Jinkai was 14 years old, and he was Old Master Hua's favorite grandson. He had been taught by Old Master Hua and Hu Mingguang since he was a child, and he had an air of maturity that far exceeded that of an average 14-year-old. Back in school, he had always been able to convince his classmates with that kind of expression. However, he didn't know that the people he was facing now were not his classmates, nor were they the employees of his father's company. Instead, they were a group of vicious criminals who were ready to run for their lives. "Hey, kid, you're quite arrogant." They looked at Hu Jinkai and snorted. "Let you go?" "Yes. It's not that I can't let you go. Ask your father to bring me the money." Hu Jinkai understood what was going on. These people wanted money. He glanced at them and saw that, except for the other 3 kidnappers were all masked. This made him sigh in relief. The fact that they were masked meant that they didn't want to kill them. They were safe for the time being. "What? Are you scared?" "Scared?" They took out his phone and stood in front of Hu Jinkai. "Come on, tell me your father's number." Hu Jinkai stared at the phone in his hand without saying a word. They didn't get angry. He punched him in the chest. "Kid, what's wrong? Arrogant? Let me tell you, it's useless. Don't try to be arrogant in front of me. If you don't want to die, do as I say, or I won't mind making you suffer." Hu Jinkai gritted his teeth and glared at De. Although he didn't want to, he didn't have a better option. This group of people could not guarantee that they would not harm them. But, if he didn't say, while he was still hesitating, he was hit in the back again. "Tell me, what's the number?" Hu Jinkai thought about it for a moment, then told De Hu Mingguang's number. As he reported, he observed the surrounding environment and their current situation, thinking that if it was possible, he must find a way to escape. In the past, Hu Mingguang always had his cell phone with him. For some reason, he didn't answer the phone right away. The thought that Hu Jinkai was lying to him, so he punched him again. "Brat, are you messing with me?" Hu Jinkai was only 14 years old, so he couldn't help but cry out in pain. His voice also woke Hu Jinyao up. Like Hu Jinkai, Hu Jinyao realized the situation he was in as soon as he woke up. At the same time, he saw De attacking Hu Jinkai. "Stop, who are you? Stop it right now. Who allowed you to hit him?" Stop it right now. Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai were only 2 years apart in age, and they had always been close. Now that he saw his older brother being beaten, how could he stand it? Even though his hands and feet were tied up, he began to struggle. He had been lying on the ground all along. At this moment, he found an opportunity to kick Da with both feet. Although he was small and weak, Hua Jinyao's kick still interfered with Da's movements. Da staggered under Hua Jinyao's kick, almost losing his balance. When she came back to her senses, she was immediately annoyed. She raised her foot and kicked Hua Jinyao's small body. Hua Jinyao was kicked so hard that he rolled a couple of times and hit the leg of a nearby table before he stopped. His back hit the leg of the table, and his whole body curled up in pain. You little bastard. How dare you? Do you think I won't kill you? Let me tell you, I have 3 hostages in my hands. Don't mess with me, or I'll kill 2 of you and leave 1 alive. Da was a fugitive, and human lives were nothing to him. After threatening Hua Jinyao, he turned to look at Hua Jinkai and knocked him on the head with his phone. You little bastard, if you don't want to die, ask your father to bring you money. Otherwise. He pulled out a gun from his back pocket and pointed it at Hua Jinkai's head. Grandpa, I don't mind sending you to hell. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao didn't expect Da to have a gun. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao were both stunned. That was a real gun, a real one. Hua Jinyao's body was still hurting from Da's kick. The places where he had been kicked and hit the leg of the table hurt even more. Apart from the pain, he was also worried and anxious. When he saw his sister lying on the ground, Hua Jinyao clenched his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He and Hua Jinkai were both grown up, but what about his sister? She was still so young. Hua Jinkai had no choice but to give Da the number of the Hua family's old house. Da took the phone and went to make the call. Hua Jinyao curled up his body and endured the pain. He began to think about how he could get out of this. Unlike Hua Jinkai, he had loved to play since he was a child. Plus, he was close to Zhang Yichen. Although Zhang Yichen was a few years older than him, the two of them got along very well. When Hua Jinkai was learning how to manage the family business, he had gone to the army with his great-aunt 2 or 3 times. He had thought about it before. Since Hua Jinkai was in the Hua family now, he could just be an idler. When he grew up, he would join the army as well. He would become a soldier like his uncle and uncle. Da took out the phone and let Hua Jinkai make the call. Hua Jinyao began to observe the surroundings. He had been in the army with Zhang Yichen many times. He loved listening to his uncle talk about how they went on missions. He was only 12 years old. But he was very smart. He had already begun to analyze the situation at hand. Da was masked, but the other 3 weren't. That meant that the other 3 were afraid of being recognized and accused. But Da wasn't afraid. What did that mean? Either Da was the boss, or Da was the errand boy. He was the one who was sacrificed. Based on his experience, that man had to be the boss. He wasn't afraid of being accused. What did that mean? Although Hua Jinyao was young, he had heard a lot. He suddenly had a very bad feeling. This man was going to kill them. Even if they got the money, they might kill the hostages. That thought came to him. Hua Jinyao couldn't sit still. He looked up at Hua Jinkai. He was looking back at him. The 14-year-old boy had a calmness that didn't belong to his age. Hua Jinyao was thinking about the same thing. After so many years, the 2 brothers had developed a tacit understanding. They looked at each other and understood what the other was thinking. What happened today was not going to end well. Hua Jinyao's eyes darted around. He knew the lives of the 3 siblings. If something went wrong today, They would have to give up their lives here. Brother De made a phone call and came straight here. He didn't hang up. Instead, he put the phone in front of Hua Jinkai and said, "Kid, your dad wants to hear your voice. Talk." Hua Jinkai didn't want to talk. He didn't want his parents to let the kidnappers get away with it. He was hit again. Hua Mingguang, who was on the phone, heard the muffled sound. Hua Mingguang immediately became nervous. There was no reason not to agree to the kidnappers' demands. But De and the others asked for cash. That would be too difficult for him. Even if the Hua family was rich, there was no reason for them to keep so much cash at home. Hua Mingguang asked De for at least a few days to prepare the money. De didn't hesitate. 2 days. I'll give you 2 days to get the money. If you don't see the money in 2 days, don't blame us for being rude. 2 days is too little. Besides, tomorrow is Sunday. The bank's VIP account department doesn't work. Can't you make an exception? 3 days. 3 days at most. If you keep arguing, I'll kill one of them right now. They ignored him and hung up the phone. After hanging up, Liang, one of Da's men, was confused. How can you give them 3 days? What if they call the police? Don't worry. They won't find us here. Even 30 days won't help, let alone 3 days. There was a reason why De said that. He had been observing the port for a long time. It was the one closest to the center and the oldest one. It had been proposed to be renovated in the first place. Later, a new port had been built in front of it, so it had been left unused. The port was far from the city, and Rong City was so big. It wouldn't be easy for them to find them. De, you're the best. Wang Ming looked at De in admiration. So, in a few days, we'll have money to spend. Of course. De glanced at Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao as he spoke. Now, they just had to wait for the Hua family to deliver the money to them. Thinking of the days when they would have money to spend, De and the others began to dream of spending money like it was water and becoming the best in the world. Lu Tongjia didn't expect that. She had only rested in her room for a while. When she woke up, all 3 of her children had been kidnapped. What was even more unexpected was that while she was frantically searching for people to save the 3 children, 2 of the 3 children had already left her forever. 3 days. To her, those 3 days of torment felt like a year. She was a mother. What she cared about the most was her children. Chapter 547. Lu Tongjia still couldn't forget the scene when she saw her 4-year-old daughter lying in a pool of blood. Her face was covered with wounds. She was no longer the beautiful and adorable little princess she used to be. How could her daughter be in such a sorry state? If the police hadn't given her the DNA report, if she hadn't recognized her child, she wouldn't have admitted that her child had ended up like that. She almost wanted to die with Hua Wuxuang. Hua Jinkai, the eldest son she had always been proud of, had also died with Hua Wuxuang. When Hua Jinkai died, he held Hua Wuxuang tightly in his arms, like a protector. Even so, he couldn't save Hua Wuxuang's life. Hua Jinkai's body was also covered with wounds, including knife and gun wounds. He was only 14 years old. 14 years old. His grades were excellent and he had just been admitted to the best high school in Rong City. Although he was young, he was quite knowledgeable. Everyone in the family regarded him as the future of the entire Hua family. But now, he was dead. He had died in such a horrible and painful way. Lu Tongjia couldn't control her emotions. She screamed and lost control of her emotions. When she was sure that the 2 children were her, she almost fainted. But she couldn't. She had another child. Where was that child? Where's Jinyao? Where's Jinyao? Lu Tongjia looked around for Hu Jinyao. She had already prepared for the worst. Would Hu Jinyao also? She didn't dare to think about it. She looked around, trying to find her son. He might be the only child alive. Even though the probability was low, as long as there was a chance, Lu Tongjia wouldn't give up. Lu Tongjia was very happy that Hu Jinyao wasn't dead. When she saw Hu Jinyao, who looked extremely weak in the warehouse, she almost burst into tears of joy. Her tears of joy didn't last long. When the criminals were arrested and Lu Tongjia read their confessions, she couldn't believe her eyes. Do you know why his brother and sister are dead, but Hu Jinyao is still alive? Lu Tongjia suddenly snapped out of her reverie. She stared at Su Qingsang's face with a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. Su Qingsang had never thought that such a thing would happen to a family like the Hu family. She shook her head and suddenly didn't want to hear what Lu Tongjia had to say next. Because he told the kidnappers that he was the most important child in the Hu family. He said that he was the one the elders of the Hu family doted on the most. He beat up his brother himself to make the kidnappers believe that he didn't hurt him. Do you believe it? He's only 12 years old, yet he's so vicious. He beat his brother and even his sister. He convinced the kidnappers to believe him. Then, because the other two hostages were no longer useful, they were killed. Su Qingsang's eyes widened. How is that possible? Impossible, she didn't believe it. Impossible. I hope it's fake too. I also hoped that it was all a bad dream. When I woke up, I still had a son and a daughter. I still had 3 adorable and precious children. Not like this. She suddenly became serious and stared at Su Qingsang's face. Why do you think I hate him? He was willing to sacrifice his own brother and sister for his own survival. He could watch his brothers and sisters die to protect himself. He could hurt them himself. Lu Tongjia's voice was choked with sobs. She clutched her heart. It had been more than 10 years, and it hadn't stopped for a moment. They were his family. His dearest brother, his dearest sister. But he couldn't watch them die like that. Lu Tongjia closed her eyes. Tears flowed down her cheeks. At that time, I really wished that I didn't have this son. Well. Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She didn't know what happened back then. However, Lu Tongjia didn't seem to be lying. Have you ever thought that there might be a misunderstanding? She didn't want to believe that Hu Jinyao was that kind of person. Even though he was only 12 years old. People say that 3 years old depends on one's age, and 7 years old depends on one's age. In her eyes, Hu Jinyao was definitely not a person who only cared about himself and others. You really do care about him. Lu Tongjia wiped the tears off her face. She sniffed and said, I also hope that it's a misunderstanding. I also hope that my only surviving son is still my good son. But I know it's not a misunderstanding. When Hu Jinyao was found, he was unconscious. Although the kidnappers wanted to keep him as a hostage, they wouldn't treat him too well. She used to be so worried that she couldn't eat or sleep well by Hu Jinyao's side. Even after seeing the kidnappers' confessions, she wanted to give Hu Jinyao a chance to explain. But what did she wait for? Hu Jinyao talked in his sleep. He said that he was the future young master of the Hu family. He said that those two were illegitimate children. Even if they got a share of the money in the future, they wouldn't get anything. It didn't matter at all. When she heard what her son said, it was like a bolt from the blue. She hated that Hu Jinyao was able to lie so well at such a young age in order to survive and protect himself. She had never known that her son had such a side to him. From that day on, in my heart, my son died too. He died in that kidnapping together with his brother and sister. Lu Tongjia's voice was calm, but she was trying hard to suppress her negative emotions. She didn't want to believe Lu Tongjia's words, but she was sure that she wasn't lying. Does Grandpa know? If Hu Jinyao really did that kind of thing, how could Grandpa tolerate it? Lu Tongjia sneered, thinking of old Master Hua's favoritism and her husband's helpless compromise. His grandpa always liked Hu Jinyao. He liked to spoil him. He even told me that Hu Jinyao was still young and immature. He would be fine if he was taught slowly. He was 12 years old, and he was still immature. No matter how immature he was, he wouldn't push his brother and sister to their deaths. Lu Tongjia felt a sharp pain in her heart. She was in so much pain. For so many years, those who knew her thought that she had only lost 2 children. But only she knew that in her heart, when she found out what Hu Jinyao had done, she had already thought that the 3 children were gone. Especially Hu Jinyao. What she couldn't tolerate the most was his cold-bloodedness. Don't blame him for being immature. She thought that she doted on her daughter a little. After all, she was a girl. But for the other 2 children, she had always been fair. Hua Mingguang was busy with work, but she cared about all the children the same. How did Hu Jinyao repay her? He could push his brother and sister to their deaths for himself. Such a person, Lu Tongjia's fingernails dug into her palms. She really hated Hu Jinyao. Not only did she hate him for killing the other 2 children, but she also hated herself. Such a child was her son. For so many years, she thought that he would feel guilty and blame himself. But he didn't. Hu Jinyao lived and worked like a normal person. Not only was he alive, but he was also living a good life. After so many years, the pain seemed to have faded away by this family. She was the only one who kept thinking about the 2 children she had lost. Other than her, who would remember that there used to be 3 children in this family? Such a person, so young, had such a vicious mind. How could she bear it? She would rather let Tianyu fall into the hands of Hui Yifan or Hui Yang. She didn't want such a vicious person to be the one who had the last laugh. Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She seemed to have come over angrily, but now seeing Lu Tongjia like this, she suddenly felt that she was in no position to blame her. If what she said was true, she really couldn't get along with Hu Jinyao like a normal mother and son without a grudge. But Jinyao, he was still young at that time. It's normal for him to be afraid of death. Mrs. Hua. No matter what, the dead are gone. It's better to cherish the people in front of you. Lu Tongjia suddenly looked at Su Qingsang, her eyes full of pain and sharpness. Yes, you all want me to let it go. But how can I let it go? If I let it go, who will remember them? After the accident, old Master Hua didn't let people talk about it anymore. Not a single person in the Hua family brought it up again. Hu Jinyao naturally became the legitimate grandson of the Hua family, the real young master of the Hua family. But only she knew that all of this was based on him sacrificing his brother and sister. How could she forgive him? Even if it was her son, she couldn't let it go, and she couldn't be indifferent to it. Su Qingsang's lips moved, but the words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. Her heart was extremely heavy. I won't forgive him. Lu Tongjia returned to her seat as she spoke. Her face was pale, and she looked very painful. You always want me to forget. But do you know? If I forget, it means betrayal. I don't want to. I can't forget my eldest son, and I can't forget my youngest daughter. If no one else remembers them, then let me remember them. I will remember them firmly and never forget them until I die. After saying that, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was only indifference in them. Go. I won't go to see him. I don't want to see him. Su Qing-sang looked at Lu Tongjia. Mrs. Hua, Su Qing-sang, you don't have to say any more. Hua Jinyao and I are getting along like this. He never listens to me, and he never treats me as his mother. Su Qing-sang gave Lu Tongjia a deep look, and in the end, she could only stay silent. Chapter 548. When she got home, Hua Jinyao hadn't woken up yet. Yang Wenchang looked at her with a guilty look in his eyes. Su Qing-sang didn't understand what that look meant until she saw Hua Jinyao's hand. The drip was done, but Yang Wenchang wasn't very familiar with it. When he pulled out the needle, he accidentally bled a little. There were blood stains on the back of Hua Jinyao's hand. Su Qing-sang glanced at him but didn't blame him. She had to blame herself for leaving Hua Jinyao here in order to question Lu Tongjia. You can go back. I'll take care of him. Okay. Yang Wenchang nodded. He thought for a moment and decided to tell Su Qing-sang. President Hua seemed to have woken up just now, but he fell asleep again. It's okay. He fell asleep because of the injection. He'll wake up a little later. Yang Wenchang finally breathed a sigh of relief. After all, Su Qing-sang was a doctor. She would take good care of Hua Jinyao. Su Qing-sang only ate casually in the evening. There was porridge in the pot that she had made. The porridge was already very tasty. However, Hua Jinyao didn't wake up. She didn't expect that a person who usually looked so healthy would be knocked down by a cold. After Aunt Yu cleaned up, Su Qing-sang asked her to go back. She looked at Hua Jinyao and guarded him with a laptop. Thinking of what Lu Tongjia had said, she went online to look up the old case. However, she didn't know if someone had hidden the information, but Su Qing-sang couldn't find anything. 10 years ago, the internet wasn't as developed as it was now. It was normal that she couldn't find anything. While she was thinking about whether she should find a time to ask Old Master Hua Jinyao woke up. Su Qing-sang heard the noise and quickly got up. Hua Jinyao saw her as soon as he opened his eyes. Old, don't talk. He had slept for a whole day. Su Qing-sang poured a glass of warm water and helped him up so that he drank most of it. After drinking the warm water, Hua Jinyao looked much better. Honey. You have a cold. Su Qing-sang looked at Hua Jinyao and said in a reproachful tone, It's not even summer yet, and you're already showering with cold water. Do you want yourself to get sick? Hua Jinyao thought of the email he had read before. He looked at her and smiled, but didn't say anything. Su Qing-sang knew that he was in a bad mood, so she didn't continue asking. She put her hand on Hua Jinyao's forehead and said, It seems that the fever is gone. But you still have to take the medicine. Wait a moment, I made some porridge. Have some porridge before you get sick. Then take the medicine. All right. Hua Jinyao had no objection. He watched her go out and soon came back with porridge in his hand. I can't help it if you think it's too bland. Su Qing-sang put the tray aside and picked up the bowl of porridge. Who told you to be sick? I can only eat this. You did it. Yes. Su Qing-sang nodded, scooped a spoonful of porridge and glared at Hua Jinyao. Don't complain. How could that be? Hua Jinyao's voice was a little hoarse, but he didn't forget to sweet talk. The porridge cooked by my wife is the best in the world. Su Qing-sang glared at him with a reproachful expression. She blew on the porridge to cool it down and placed it next to his lips. Hua Jinyao enjoyed the care of his wife, and his eyes were full of tenderness when he looked at her. Su Qing-sang fed him slowly, but methodically. She seemed to be very familiar with it. Hua Jinyao looked at her and smiled. You're very familiar with it. Yes. It's not like I haven't done it before. When Su Qingsang said this, she froze while feeding him the porridge. She was so familiar with it because of Xiang Kaiping. At that time, Xiang Kaiping fell and hurt her waist. Although there were nurses in the hospital, she was the one taking care of her. But who would have thought that Xiang Kaiping wasn't her biological mother? The last time they met was such an unpleasant scene. Xiang Kaiping didn't understand her, and she couldn't muster up the courage to ask if Xiang Kaiping was doing well. Hua Jinyao could naturally think of what she could think of. Do you miss Auntie? Xiang Kaiping was a good person. Hua Jinyao never denied that. If she really was Su Qingsang's biological mother, it would actually be good. If you want to see her, I can help you arrange it. Su Qingsang pursed her lips tightly and finally shook her head. Without saying anything, she put the last spoonful of porridge into Hua Jinyao's mouth. Another bowl. Okay. Su Qingsang got up to get the porridge. She actually wanted to see Xiang Kaiping. But so what if she saw her? Whether it was Xiang Kaiping or her, neither of them could go back to the past. It was impossible for them to be as close as mother and daughter as before. The last time they met was like a broken relationship, so Su Qingsang was also afraid to see Xiang Kaiping. During this period of time, she would also think of Xiang Kaiping. Last time when she went to Lin City, she wanted to go to see her, but later, time was tight, and she really didn't know what to do if she saw her, so she could only give up. She looked down. Maybe next time when there was a chance, she could secretly take a look. She didn't want to disturb her, just take a look. Hua Jinyao ate another bowl of porridge, and Su Qingsang gave him the medicine. He was still not in good spirits, and his face was still a little pale. After Su Qingsang cleaned up, she returned to the room and thought about Lu Tongjia's words. She couldn't believe that the person Lu Tongjia was talking about was Hua Jinyao. Jinyao. She wanted to ask him about the kidnapping case back then. She wanted to ask him if he still remembered what happened back then. She wanted to ask him how his brother and sister had died. Was he really the one who killed them? But now, looking at Hua Jinyao's weak face, she couldn't ask a word. Yes. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She took out the thermometer and said, "Take your temperature again and see if the fever is down." It should be down, right? Don't be silly. Take it first. She gestured for him to put the thermometer in place, and Su Qingsang sat down next to him and looked at him. Do you still have a headache? It doesn't hurt, Hua Jinyao added. It doesn't hurt at all. It's just that my body is a little stiff. I've slept for a day. How can it not be stiff? Su Qingsang looked at him and couldn't help but say, "You too. You're so old. Why did you run to take a cold shower? Do you think you're Superman?" Hua Jinyao's smile was a little faint, and he didn't say why he took a cold shower. Su Qingsang wanted to ask a few times, but she stopped because of his expression. What's wrong? Hua Jinyao seemed to have noticed something wrong with Su Qingsang. Don't worry, I'm in good health. This was an accident. Su Qingsang used to think that she couldn't understand Hua Jinyao. He always had some emotions that were hidden in his heart. But now, she suddenly felt that she could understand him a little more. He was clearly sick, leaning against the headboard. His heart hurt, didn't it? He was hurt by Lu Tongjia and misunderstood by his own mother. But he could hide everything with such a strong and deep look in his eyes, as if nothing had happened. Once again, she felt a slight, gentle throbbing pain in her heart. The pain was so unbearable that she couldn't help it. She sat on the bed, leaned forward, and kissed Hua Jinyao's lips. Her action surprised him, but he quickly pulled her body away. I'm sick. He didn't want to infect her. Don't worry. It's okay. Su Chingsang smiled slightly. I'm in good health. She wanted to kiss him again, but Hua Jinyao held her shoulder and said, You're a doctor. What's wrong? Don't you have any medical knowledge? Su Chingsang looked at Hua Jinyao. Because of his illness, his lips were darker than usual. The way he looked at her was clearly disapproving. She smiled and said, Yes. I'm a doctor. But I'm still your wife. Su Chingsang put her hands on his shoulders and slowly moved closer to him. Maybe you'll get better if you infect me with your cold. Hua Jinyao looked at her half-joking, half-serious eyes, and held her in his arms with the hand that didn't have the thermometer. He pressed her head against his chest and pressed his chin against the top of her hair. You're my wife, and I'm your husband. What should I do? I don't want you to catch a cold. He gently kissed the top of her hair and said, If you really want me to kiss you, well, you can wait until I get better. He was being naughty again. Su Chingsang gently patted him on the arm. Be careful, don't drop the thermometer. Hua Jinyao's words brought Su Chingsang back to her senses. She stepped back, looked at the time, and took out the thermometer for him. It's 38 degrees. It's still a little hot. You should rest early. Have a good sleep. The fever should be completely gone by tomorrow. Well, thank you, Dr. Su. You've worked hard, Dr. Su. Hua Jinyao spoke in a hoarse voice. Su Chingsang pulled the pillow he was leaning against away. Sleep when you're sick. Wife. How am I not being honest? Hua Jinyao said that, but he still lay down obediently. He yawned. Because of the medicine, he wanted to sleep even more than usual. Aren't you going to sleep? I'm going to take a shower. Su Chingsang covered him with the quilt. You go to sleep first. I'll be right there. When Su Chingsang came out of the shower, Hua Jinyao was already asleep. She looked at his sleeping face, and in the end, she couldn't bring herself to ask him about the kidnapping case. She didn't sleep deeply that night. She woke up from time to time to look at Hua Jinyao. She was relieved to find that he was sleeping soundly and didn't seem to have a nightmare. After all, Hua Jinyao was young and healthy. When Su Chingsang woke up the next morning, he had recovered most of his strength. She stood up with her coat and was about to go out. You're going to work. Su Chingsang quickly sat up and said with a disapproving face, You're still very weak. You still need to rest more. It's okay. Hua Jinyao shook his head. I have a lot of things to do in the company. I can't rest for too long. Su Chingsang looked at his face and wanted to say something, but she hesitated. In the end, she said helplessly, Then don't drive. I'll drive you. Call me when you get off work, and I'll pick you up. Hua Jinyao didn't object this time. It's my honor to be my driver, Dr. Su. Seeing that he was talking nonsense again, Su Chingsang really believed that he was fine. She looked at Hua Jinyao's eyes carefully. There was no pain or discomfort like that night. Su Chingsang's heart ached. He had hidden his emotions again. Realizing this, her heart ached dully. The following words were free. 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 Important things should be said 3 times. Because the author said that he couldn't fit 500 words, I found that some people don't understand Hua's mother's behavior and say that she's crazy. Let me tell you the truth. There was a family where the brother died to save the sister. After that, the mother never liked her daughter. They were both biological children. It's not that she valued boys over girls. She just felt that the daughter killed her son. When I was writing this story, I was inspired by this news. In fact, if a person walked into the wrong path, it was very difficult to get out. Just like Huo's mother, she lost 2 children at once. These 2 children also died because of Hu Jinyao, at least in her heart, she thought so they took things too hard and went to extremes. There was a reason for this. Go and see Zhang Xiaohan's mother and Mei Yanfang's mother. What did Zhang Xiaohan and Mei Yanfang do wrong? But how did their mother treat them? One framed her daughter for taking drugs, and the other auctioned off her daughter's underwear after she died. I really can't understand these 2 mothers-in-law. Why do they have such parents? But in fact, there are such people in this world. In this world, it doesn't mean that people who are related by blood will forgive all the mistakes made by each other. My husband has a classmate. His father cheated and hurt his mother. Until now, this classmate has refused to forgive his father. He hasn't called him father for 2 or 3 years. He doesn't speak when he sees his father. He turns his face away when he sees his father. He doesn't want to stay at home. This is just an affair. The other party is his own father. He can't forgive him for not letting it go. How to say it? Some people can accept the hurt from their loved ones, but some can't. Those who can accept it will just laugh it off. Those who can't accept it may have to grieve for the rest of their lives. Chapter 549. After breakfast, she walked Hu Jinyao to his company. Su Qingsang put a box of medicine in his hand. Take the medicine as soon as you feel uncomfortable. Call me if you can't take it. I'll be right there. Hu Jinyao suddenly approached her. Before she could finish her words, Hu Jinyao kissed her on the cheek. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at him. He kissed her and immediately moved away. He had a mischievous smile on his face. Dr. Su, don't worry. I'll take good care of myself. Actually, his complexion was not very good. His face was slightly pale, but she knew that she couldn't convince him. Su Qingsang stopped talking. Maybe she should call Yang Wenchang later and ask him to keep an eye on him. Hu Jinyao picked up the box of medicine, waved at her, and got out of the car. He seemed to be in a good mood. However, Su Qingsang's heart was heavy. She couldn't relax at all. Of course, she believed that he would take good care of himself. But what was he going to do? After all, the person who hurt him was his mother. His biological mother. Besides, Lu Tongjia could hurt the people around him. It must be a serious problem. She didn't know how Hu Jinyao was going to solve it. President Hua. Why are you at work? Yang Wenchang saw Hu Jinyao at work and looked surprised. You've recovered. Yes. You've recovered. I'm almost recovered. Hu Jinyao nodded and looked at Ding Qing's office. Is Ding Qing here? Not yet. Yang Wenchang followed him into the office and said, President Hua, what do you think about Ding Qing? Should we fire her? Hu Jinyao walked to the desk and sat down. He put the box of medicine on the desk and said, What do you think? Yang Wenchang frowned and thought carefully. President Hua, you don't want to fire her. Not now. Hu Jinyao thought of Lu Tongjia and said, She hasn't done anything serious. Why should we fire her? Should we just keep her? No. I'll ask my mother to send me another one. I don't know who sent her. His voice sounded sarcastic. Yang Wenchang didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent. Hu Jinyao didn't need his answer. It was better to keep Ding Qing here than to find someone else. However, there are some things that we can arrange. When Hu Jinyao said this, his eyes were sharp and full of danger. Yang Wenchang suddenly had a feeling that someone was going to be in trouble. Halfway through their business discussion, Yang Wenchang's phone rang. He looked at the number and was stunned for a moment. He glanced at Hu Jinyao and quickly picked up the call. Mrs. Hua. His shout attracted Hu Jinyao's attention immediately. Yang Wenchang felt a lot of pressure for a moment. Assistant Yang, I'm Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang cut to the chase and said, Jinyao hasn't fully recovered yet. He insisted that he had to go to work. I can't stop him from going to work, but you have to be careful today. If he has any problems, you have to call me immediately. I got it. Mrs. Hua. Also, keep an eye on him. Lunch should be light. Don't let him work overtime at night. If there are any social engagements, just reject them. Yes. I got it. There's nothing else. Thank you for your hard work. Not at all, not at all. Yang Wenchang hung up the phone and looked at Hu Jinyao. It was Mrs. Hua. She asked me to keep an eye on you so that you don't get too tired. Hu Jinyao finally had a smile on his face. Thinking of how Su Qingsang had been worried when she came out and repeatedly told him to take care of his body, he felt a little warm in his heart. Don't worry, it's just a few grasshoppers. These people won't be happy for too long. Since he had seen through the other party's plot, how could he let the other party continue to be complacent? Dr. Su, is my illness serious? The patient's voice brought Su Qingsang's attention back from the checklist in her hand. She looked up at the person in front of her. It's not very serious. It's just a small cyst. Take some anti-inflammatory medicine, pay attention to your diet, and rest. This doesn't need to be cut off. Would it be useless to just take medicine? Can you do surgery? Ms. Zhang, look. Your cyst is less than 2 centimeters. It's actually just inflammation. You just need to take some medicine and pay attention to rest. It will naturally go away. Under normal circumstances, we don't recommend surgery. Because it's not necessary at all. All right then. I'll listen to you. I'll prescribe some medicine for you. You can take the list and get the medicine. After saying that, Su Qingsang added, these medicines can be reimbursed if you have medical insurance. So don't worry. All right. Thank you, then. After sending the patient away, there was no debate today. Su Qingsang got up, rubbed her shoulders, and walked to her office. She was a little distracted just now. In fact, on the one hand, she was worried about Hu Jinyao's health and whether he could take it today. On the other hand, she was still thinking about the kidnapping case. Lu Tongjia had lost 2 children at once. It was not impossible for her to vent her anger on Hu Jinyao. Then there might be some misunderstanding. Should she help Hu Jinyao to resolve the misunderstanding between Lu Tongjia and him? There was no child who didn't want a mother's love. She believed that Hu Jinyao was no exception. So what happened back then? If she couldn't get all the answers from Lu Tongjia, could she ask Old Master Hua? Or directly ask Hu Jinyao? With this idea, she couldn't help but take out her phone and call Hu Jinyao. When she went out in the morning, her voice was still a little hoarse. She asked Yang Wenchang to buy some throat lozenges for him. Honey. It's me. Su Qingsang heard that his voice seemed to be a little better. How are you? Are you feeling better? Yes, much better. That's good. Su Qingsang paused for a moment. She didn't know how to ask the question in her heart. What's wrong? Hu Jinyao noticed the pause in her voice. What's wrong? I just wanted to ask you. The second half of the sentence went in circles, but what came out of his mouth was, have you eaten? Not yet. Wenchang ordered takeout for me. It'll be delivered later. Takeout. Su Qingsang subconsciously frowned. Isn't there a cafeteria downstairs? He said that the soup in that hotel is good. It's good for the stomach. That's good. After another silence, Su Qingsang bit her lip and walked to the end of the corridor with her phone. Honey. Hua Jinyao called her again. Anything else? Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang felt that her palms were sweaty. But maybe because she didn't face Hua Jinyao directly, she was a little braver. I heard something. Chapter 550. Auntie, your mother, she. Su Qingsang didn't finish her sentence. She was too embarrassed to say it. She had never thought that there would be a mother who would say this to her child. Can I ask why she dislikes you so much? There was a sudden silence. Su Qingsang heard the heavy breathing on the other end of the phone. She suddenly realized that she might have done something wrong. She shouldn't have asked. She was about to explain when she heard Hua Jinyao's voice. Su Qingsang couldn't see his expression over the phone, but she could clearly hear the gloominess in his voice. If she doesn't like you, then she doesn't like you. What other reason is there? Su Qingsang's heart ached a little. Hua Jinyao was definitely not the kind of person who would speak up for his brother and sister in exchange for a chance to live. Hua Jinyao, actually, I heard, honey. Wen Chang brought lunch up. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat first. Okay. Su Qingsang couldn't finish her sentence. The rest of her words were stuck in her throat like a stone. She knew that after today, she would never have the courage to ask again. Hua Jinyao. Yes. It's okay. I'm going to eat too. Okay. Hua Jinyao hung up without saying anything else. Su Qingsang listened to the beeping sound on the phone and felt a little sad again. She closed her eyes, trying to suppress the emotion. Forget it. Since he didn't want to talk about it, she wouldn't ask. Some things should be left in the past. If Lu Tongjia didn't like Hua Jinyao, then so be it. Anyway, he still had her. It was enough that she liked him. Su Qingsang only had a minor surgery in the afternoon, so she got off work early. She didn't go to pick up Hua Jinyao directly. Instead, she went to the nearby market to buy some vegetables. She planned to cook by herself today. After buying the vegetables, she went to Hua Jinyao's company to pick him up. She wanted to go earlier to see if he had recovered from his cold. Also, she was afraid that he would be unhappy with her question at noon. He might think that she was trying to prize something out and that she wanted to take the initiative. She didn't have such a thought. She just hoped that she could help him if she could. She parked the car and went upstairs. She had been here once before. At that time, young Wen Chang had taken her to the CEO's exclusive elevator, and she had gone upstairs with familiarity. Just as she was about to walk into Hua Jinyao's office, the door next to her opened. Ding Qing walked out. The two of them bumped into each other. When Su Qingsang saw him, she subconsciously furrowed her brows a little, but it only lasted for a few seconds. Soon, her face was as calm as when she first came in. She ignored Ding Qing and walked straight to Hua Jinyao's office. Ding Qing stood in front of Su Qingsang. She didn't know if she did it on purpose or not. Su Qingsang's expression didn't change, and she took a step to the side. When she moved to the left, Ding Qing moved to the right. When she moved to the right, Ding Qing moved to the left. The two of them stood face to face. Every step Ding Qing took was right in Su Qingsang's way. After a few times, Su Qingsang stopped and looked up at Ding Qing. What's up, Secretary Ding? Mrs. Hua, you're the one who's always blocking my way. Why are you asking me if I'm fine? Ding Qing raised her eyebrows slightly. There was obvious provocation in her eyes. Su Qingsang narrowed her eyes. If one looked carefully, one would find that her expression was exactly the same as Hua Jinyao's. Ding Qing stood there, waiting for Su Qingsang to lose her temper. However, Su Qingsang glanced at her and took a step back. Since Secretary Ding thinks that I'm blocking your way, please, go ahead. Not only did she step aside, but she also gestured for Ding Qing to go first. Ding Qing was a little surprised. She stood there and didn't move. Su Qingsang turned her face sideways to look at her. What? Didn't you say that I'm blocking your way? Please, go ahead. Ding Qing didn't leave. Instead, she took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qingsang. Mrs. Hua, you're very patient. With a smile on her lips, she leaned forward slightly and got close to Su Qingsang's face. In a very low voice, she said, I just don't know if Mrs. Hua will still be able to bear it when President Hua becomes mine one day. Su Qingsang stood still, watching Ding Qing yelling in front of her. Suddenly, she giggled. Secretary Ding, you're so young, but you have such a bad memory. I think you need to see a doctor. What do you mean? Secretary Ding, I told you last time that Hua Jinyao, he's not erect. Why can't you remember that? Or do you want him even though he's like this? Of course. Ding Qing raised her chin and said arrogantly, Mrs. Hua, I'm not that kind of shallow woman. The one I love is President Hua's woman. Is that so? Then I really have to look at you in a different light. Seeing the proud look on Ding Qing's face, Su Qingsang suddenly changed the topic. But, you have to be able to afford it. She mimicked Ding Qing. She leaned forward, got close to Ding Qing's ear, and whispered. After all, Hua Jinyao has high standards. He has high standards. I really don't take a liking to just anyone. With a smile on her face, she took a step back after saying that. Seeing Ding Qing's face turn green, the smile on Ding Qing's face grew brighter and brighter. Without looking at Ding Qing walked past her and was about to leave. Mrs. Hua, you've gone too far. Ding Qing blocked Su Qingsang's way and said coldly, Mrs. Hua, you're too confident. After all, no one knows how things will turn out until the end. Isn't that right? Indeed. Su Qingsang nodded. No one knows how things will turn out until the end. But I don't need to wait until the end. I can tell you that Hua Jinyao is mine. No one can take him away from me. Mrs. Hua, you're so confident. I hope you can always be so confident. Of course. Su Qingsang's expression didn't change. She looked at Ding Qing calmly, as if she didn't care about Ding Qing at all. After all, people who are liked and loved by others will naturally have confidence. Unlike some people who have no one to love or want them, so they have to steal other people's men. Speaking of which, it's really sad, don't you think so? She didn't think that she would lose to Ding Qing when it came to talking. Ding Qing's face grew darker and darker. Her chest heaved. If she didn't care about the consequences, she would have hit Su Qingsang. Mrs. Hua, you really don't need to be so proud. Even if I'm not with President Hua, there will be other women around him. It's just a matter of time. Do you think that you can stop all the women who approach President Hua? Chapter 551. While saying that, she glanced at Ding Qing from head to toe without hesitation. Her eyes scanned Ding Qing's body from head to toe, like X-rays. You don't need to be careful of someone like Secretary Ding. In other words, Ding Qing wasn't qualified. Did I say something wrong? I'm sorry. After all, doctors like to tell the truth. Ding Qing's hands were hanging by her sides. She clenched her fists. She was about to lose her temper. Suddenly, the office door opened. Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang walked out of the office. Seeing the two of them standing together, Hu Jinyao paused for a second, then glanced at Yang Wenchang. Both Yang Wenchang and Hu Jinyao had the feeling that Ding Qing was bullying Su Qingsang. Hu Jinyao took a step forward, and his face darkened. Su Qingsang walked up to him and put her arm around his. "Are you off work? Are you feeling better?" Hu Jinyao didn't answer her question. He glanced at Ding Qing, who was not far away from him, and ignored her. He lowered his head to look at Su Qingsang. His eyes were gentle. "Why didn't you call me? I could have asked Wenchang to pick you up. Assistant Yang took me there last time. It's not like I don't know him." Su Qingsang smiled brightly, but didn't mention what had just happened. "What are you talking about?" Hu Jinyao asked casually. He glanced at Ding Qing's face out of the corner of his eye. Thinking of what Su Qingsang had said to him last time, his eyes turned dangerous. "Nothing. Secretary Ding was worried about you." Su Qingsang glanced at Ding Qing as she spoke. "Secretary Ding told me that she was talking about you. You're always working like a madman. She told me to care about you more." "Really?" Hu Jinyao glanced at Ding Qing. "Thank you, Secretary Ding. You're so considerate." "Of course." Su Qingsang nodded. She raised her face shyly. "Speaking of which, I feel like I don't care enough about you. Jinyao, you won't blame me, will you?" "Of course." Hu Jinyao rubbed Su Qingsang's head. "I marry a wife to love her. I'll be happy if you take care of yourself. Jinyao, you're so nice." Su Qingsang tiptoed and planted a kiss on Hu Jinyao's cheek. "All right. Since you're done, let's go home first." "All right." Hu Jinyao looked back at Yang Wenchang. "Assistant Yang, I'll leave the rest to you." "Yes." Yang Wenchang nodded. Their eyes met in the air. They both understood the meaning of each other's eyes. Su Qingsang didn't notice the look in Hu Jinyao's eyes. She put her arm around Hu Jinyao's and walked past Ding Qing. "Thank you for your concern, Secretary Ding. We'll knock off first." "Take care, President Hu," Ding Qing said. She didn't look as aggressive as she had been when she was talking to Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang couldn't help but admire him. Just now, Ding Qing had said that she could tolerate it, but she actually thought that Ding Qing was more tolerant. He just didn't know how much this person could endure and how long he could endure. "Jinyao. I'm not happy. What happened?" Seeing that Su Qingsang's face suddenly darkened, Hu Jinyao stopped walking and asked, "Why are you upset?" "Her." Su Qingsang also stopped walking and pointed her finger at Ding Qing. "I'm not happy that she cares about you so much." Su Qingsang showed a side of her that she had never shown before in front of Hu Jinyao. She pouted slightly and her eyes were obviously unhappy. "You're mine. I don't like it when other women care about you so much." Ding Qing widened her eyes and looked at Su Qingsang. She couldn't believe her eyes. Just now, this woman wasn't like this in front of her. But now, she was pretending. Su Qingsang pretended that she didn't see the shock in Ding Qing's eyes. She held Hu Jinyao's arm. "Jinyao." Hu Jinyao stopped walking, narrowed his eyes, and looked at Ding Qing. "Did you hear that, Secretary Ding?" Ding Qing held back the urge to vomit blood, but she swallowed her anger. "I know. President Hu, I'll be more careful next time." Ding Qing lowered her head. She looked humble and low-key. She was totally different from the arrogant woman she had been a moment ago. Hu Jinyao glanced at her, then lowered his head to meet Su Qingsang's eyes. The gloominess in his eyes faded away, and he became gentle almost instantly. Not angry anymore. No. Su Chingsang shook her head. She looked willful, which was rare for her. I'm still angry. I'm still not happy. Seeing Hu Jinniao frown, she shook his arm and said, think about it. She cares about you so much. It's obviously more than a colleague. You two work in the same company, and you're even on the same floor. She's your secretary. Neither Yang Wenchang nor Hu Jinniao had seen this side of Su Chingsang. Yang Wenchang was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out. He couldn't believe that Su Chingsang was the same person who was calm and capable yesterday. However, Hu Jinniao noticed that deep in Su Chingsang's eyes, there was a mischievous look in them. Su Chingsang shook Hu Jinniao's arm like a child who couldn't get candy. I don't care. I don't want to see her stay by your side. I don't want to see her ever again. You should stay on this floor and work together. I don't want to see her care about you in the name of work. What do you want then? Hu Jinniao wanted to ask Ding Qing to leave, but he needed an opportunity. Fire her. Su Chingsang raised her head and pointed at Ding Qing confidently. I want you to fire her. Ding Qing finally couldn't stand it anymore. She took a step forward and said, Mrs. Hua. Please don't, that was too much. Ding Qing held back her words. She looked at Su Chingsang and said, Mrs. Hua, I'm an employee of Tianyu Group. You're not from Tianyu Group. I don't think you have the right to do that. No matter how calm she was, she couldn't stand Su Chingsang, who didn't play by the rules. She couldn't stand Su Chingsang, who didn't play by the rules. She knew that she was being humiliated by what she said, but she couldn't help but want to argue back. Su Chingsang blinked and looked at Hu Jinniao. She looked innocent and cute. Jinniao, she said that I don't have the right to do that. Don't I have the right to fire someone from your company? Of course, you do. Hu Jinniao resisted the urge to laugh. He also resisted the urge to hug Su Chingsang and kiss her hard. He looked at Ding Qing coldly and said, Miss Ding, did you hear what my wife said? Go pack your things and leave now. Su Chingsang widened her eyes. In fact, she just wanted to make things difficult for Ding Qing. She didn't expect that Hu Jinniao would really ask her to leave. President Hua, of course, she didn't think that Hu Jinniao had found out what she had done. She didn't think that Hu Jinniao had wanted to fire her anyway. She took a step forward and stood in front of Hu Jinniao. The look on her face was anger. She was unwilling and dissatisfied with Su Chingsang. Chapter 552. Reckless. Hu Jinniao raised his eyebrows and looked at Su Chingsang. I don't think so. President Hua. Ding Qing clenched her teeth so hard that they almost broke. President Hua, can you please be serious? This is Tianyu Group, Tianyu Company, not your home. Don't you have any problem with Mrs. Hua's behavior? No problem. Good. Then what did I do wrong? Ding Qing stared at Su Chingsang, then looked at Hu Jinniao in disbelief. She was the one who helped him get rid of Qiao Hong. Shouldn't Hu Jinniao thank her? But he fired her so easily. What did you do wrong? Hu Jinniao put an arm around Su Chingsang's shoulder. You just made my wife unhappy. Su Chingsang was held in his arms. She raised her head to look at him, and her eyes were almost sparkling. That's it. Ding Qing was so angry that her voice began to tremble. She couldn't control it. That's it. That's enough. Hu Jinniao turned around and kissed Su Chingsang's cheek. I'm henpecked. Su Chingsang almost burst out laughing. Yang Wenchang, who was standing not far behind them, was having a hard time holding back his laughter. Hu Jinyao was calm. He held Su Qingsang's hand tightly and said, "Let's go." President Hua. Ding Qing couldn't help but step forward to stop them from leaving. Yang Wenchang stepped forward and blocked Ding Qing's way. "Secretary Ding, you should have heard what President Hua said." "Assistant Yang, President Hua is crazy. Why didn't you stop Mrs. Hua?" Ding Qing was furious, but she still managed to find a trace of rationality. Everyone in Tianyu Group knew that if there was one person who could change Hu Jinyao's mind, that person would be Yang Wenchang. "Secretary Ding. President Hua has already made things clear. Don't make a fuss." Like Hu Jinyao, Yang Wenchang didn't take it as Su Qingsang's willfulness. He listened to the audio file and knew who Ding Qing was. Her dismissal was not an injustice at all. As for why I didn't stop her, I'm sorry. The Hua family. But Mrs. Hua was the boss. Who asked you to upset Mrs. Hua? Su Qingsang didn't care how unhappy Ding Qing was. She followed Hu Jinyao into the elevator. She still had a surreal feeling. Her hand was held by Hu Jinyao, and she turned to look at him from time to time. Her gaze was very complicated. It was no longer just being touched. It was shock and disbelief. Hu Jinyao caught her gaze and squeezed her palm. "Why do you keep looking at me? Have you realized that your husband is the most handsome man in the universe?" Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang was just a little angry because Ding Qing always talked nonsense in front of her. She didn't really want her to be fired. I was just joking with you. I don't really want you to fire Secretary Ding." She was not a willful woman, nor was she a woman who would make trouble for no reason. She came here today only because she didn't like Ding Qing's arrogant and aggressive attitude. Besides, Ding Qing knew that Hu Jinyao had a wife, but she still tried to get close to him. However, she had heard from Hu Jinyao that Ding Qing was quite capable. Since she was capable, it would be a pity to let her go. Hu Jinyao, talk to Assistant Yang. Don't let Ding Qing leave like this. What? Are you not happy to see her? Just let her go. He had indeed planned to keep Ding Qing under his nose to keep an eye on her. However, Hu Jinyao changed his mind. So what if Lu Tongjia asked someone to come? Zhang Yang was on paternity leave, not maternity leave. If it didn't work, Hu Jinyao could ask Zhang Yang to come back. No. That's too childish. Su Qingsang didn't think it was appropriate. I was really joking with you. She does make me feel a little uncomfortable, but it's not enough to fire her. The most important point was, you fired her so casually, and for such a reason. Maybe the board of directors of your company will scold you later. She didn't say who the board members were. The company belonged to the Hua family. For so many years, Hua Mingguang watched Lu Tongjia make things difficult for Hu Jinyao without saying a word. She didn't want to make things more difficult for him in the company. She didn't know much about business before, but ever since she met Li Qianxue, she gradually learned some things. For example, Li Qianxue kicked Su Qinghui out of the company. However, not many people knew the truth. They all said that Li Qianxue was too cruel and that she killed the donkey when it was no longer needed. She gave up the bow when she was done. Li Qianxue wouldn't tell her these things. However, there was still Su Yusin in the company. He would occasionally say a few words. She asked Shi Mengwan, who stayed in Lin City, and she could guess most of it. Li Qianxue completely belonged to the Li family. Li Qianxue fired Su Qinghui, and people said that Tianyu Group didn't belong to Hu Jinyao alone. What if Hu Mingguang took this opportunity to make trouble for Hu Jinyao? Don't worry. It'll be fine. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand. She's my secretary. Since she made you unhappy, she'll still be my secretary in the future. She'll work by my side, and you'll have to see her eventually. It's inevitable that you'll be unhappy. It's better to let her go. But Hua Jinyao kissed her on the lips, and she couldn't say the rest of the words. Don't worry. Baby. It'll be fine. His calling her baby made Su Qingsang's heart soften. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know how to change Hua Jinyao's mind. All right. Hua Jinyao looked at her serious face and gently pinched her cheek. Smile. Don't frown. You look like a little old woman. Go to hell. Su Qingsang waved his hand away. You look like a little old man. Yes. I'm a little old man, and you're a little old woman. We're just a couple. Hua Jinyao didn't object. Su Qingsang also smiled and took the initiative to hold his hand. Okay. We'll be a pair of old men and old women. If she could hold this person's hand until the end of her life, then this life would really be perfect, wouldn't it? Hua Jinyao's reaction was to hold her hand tightly and not let go. Old Master Hua looked at Hua Jinyao with concern in his eyes. Why do you look a little thinner? Have you been busy at the company recently? It's been all right. Hua Jinyao had been sick for 2 days. Although he recovered quickly, he had been busy during this period. He didn't actually look thinner, but his complexion had always been a little worse. Take care of yourself. Don't be too tired. Old Master Hua was still very concerned about this grandson of his. There was a lot of concern in his words. Hua Jinyao was touched, and his expression was a little moved. Thank you, Grandpa. I know. Qingsang. Old Master Hua looked at Su Qingsang, who was sitting next to him. Jinyao always doesn't care about his own affairs. Since you're already married, you should be more responsible and take care of him. Grandpa, don't worry. I will. Su Qingsang didn't need Old Master Hua to tell her to take good care of Hua Jinyao. However, Hua Jinyao was obviously busier than before these days. She knew that it wasn't good for his recovery, but she couldn't stop him. She thought that Hua Jinyao was busy because Ding Qing left. She felt a little guilty because he was short of someone to take care of. Was she causing trouble for him? Thinking of this, Su Qingsang couldn't help but feel a little guilty. It wasn't that Old Master Hua didn't know that, but he just said it casually. Grandpa, what are you talking about? I don't need Qingsang to take care of me. I should take care of her. Take care of each other. Take care of each other. Old Master Hua liked to see the two of them getting along well. Nothing could make him happier than seeing his grandson and granddaughter-in-law get along well. At this time, Lu Tongjia came downstairs. After venting her emotions on Su Qingsang the other day, she felt a little uncomfortable these days. She didn't look very good. As soon as she came downstairs, she saw Old Master Hua, Hua Jinyao, and Su Qingsang looking at each other happily. She slightly frowned, walked to the sofa, and sat down. Hua Jinyao saw her and greeted her. Su Qingsang followed suit and called her auntie. Ever since she found out about the knot in Lu Tongjia's heart, the way she looked at her was a little complicated. Rationally, she knew that Lu Tongjia was also a pitiful person, but emotionally, she couldn't accept Lu Tongjia venting her anger on her. Lu Tongjia acted as if she didn't see Su Qingsang's gaze. She would never forgive Hua Jinyao. Even if Su Qingsang found out, it would be the same. It's rare today. It's not the weekend. You still remember to come back to see your grandpa? Hua Jinyao didn't respond. Su Qingsang slightly frowned because of the hostility in her words. She looked at Hua Jinyao with some worry. No matter how much Lu Tongjia didn't like him before, she probably didn't do anything to the company, but now, I can come to see Grandpa even if it's not the weekend. Hua Jinyao wasn't affected by Lu Tongjia's cold face at all. I can come if I want to. Yeah, you're old enough to have your own ideas. You don't need other people's permission to do anything. You can do it on your own. What she said was really a little strange. Old Master Hua glanced at Lu Tongjia. Tongjia, I'm happy that the child came to see me. What are you talking about? What am I talking about? I'm talking like a normal person. Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Jinyao with obvious dissatisfaction in her eyes. Dad, you don't know what Hua Jinyao has done. What's wrong with me saying a few words to him? Tongjia. Old Master Hua knew that Lu Tongjia didn't like Hua Jinyao and that she had a knot in her heart. For so many years, he didn't say anything, but recently, Lu Tongjia seemed to have gone more and more overboard. Now, he had the intention to side with Hua Jinyao. He was a little unhappy about Lu Tongjia's provocation. Dad. Do you know? With one word, Hua Jinyao fired an employee who was doing a good job in the company. Lu Tongjia glanced at Hua Jinyao and then looked at Old Master Hua. She didn't hide the sarcasm and dissatisfaction in her eyes. Chapter 553. Lu Tongjia didn't expect that Ding Qing hadn't even been his wife for 3 months. Hua Jinyao fired her just like that, and the reason was so ridiculous. When she heard that, she was so angry that she almost died of anger. If she hadn't been sick and had rested at home for a few days, she might have gone to him and questioned him. Old Master Hua didn't understand. He glanced at Hua Jinyao. He didn't believe that Hua Jinyao was a man without a sense of propriety. He fired her just because of what Su Qingsang said. Speaking of this, Lu Tongjia was even more dissatisfied with Su Qingsang. She knew that she was an illegitimate daughter, and that she was inexperienced and incompetent. Previously, he had noticed that she had some manners. She wasn't someone who didn't know manners. But now, because of her inexplicable jealousy, Hua Jinyao fired her employee like a fatuous emperor. Only Su Qingsang could do something like that. Thinking of this, Lu Tongjia couldn't help but ask. She turned around and looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, I really want to ask you, what about your upbringing? Is your upbringing telling you to meddle in your husband's business? Is it because of your family upbringing that you kick people out just because you don't like them? Su Qingsang, if that's the case, then I've learned a lot. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line. She had thought that she had been a little irrational that day, but now she was speechless. Old Master Hua didn't believe that Su Qingsang was that kind of person. He glanced at Hua Jinyao and said, "Isn't your secretary Zhang Yang? How did he offend Qingsang?" Old Master Hua had been to the company many times, and Zhang Yang had run errands for Hua Jinyao. Hearing Lu Tongjia's words, he couldn't help but look at Su Qingsang. He had a good impression of Zhang Yang. He was down-to-earth and hard-working. Most importantly, Yang Wenchang was steady and meticulous. Zhang Yang was lively and quick-witted. Both Zhang Yang and Zhang Yang were good helpers for Hua Jinyao. Which one is Zhang Yang? It's Ding Qing. Lu Tongjia glanced at Su Qingsang as she spoke. Hua Jinyao has a new female secretary. She, on the other hand, argued with Hua Jinyao to fire her just because she found Hua Jinyao pleasing to the eye. Hua Jinyao hadn't said a word before. Now, he raised his head and glanced at Lu Tongjia. Finally, he said, "Mom, you really know a lot about me. Ding Qing has only been here for a few days. Mom remembers her name quite clearly." Lu Tongjia's expression changed slightly, but she soon calmed down because of her age. She looked at Hu Jinyao with a cold face. What's wrong? Am I wrong to care about you? Thank you for your concern, Mom. Hu Jinyao said ambiguously. When his eyes met Lu Tongjia's face, his gaze was deep and meaningful. His gaze was suggestive, making Lu Tongjia feel uncomfortable. Hu Jinyao, what kind of attitude is that? What do you mean? I'm your mother. What kind of tone are you using to talk to me? Hu Jinyao didn't lower his head, nor did he look away. He just stared at Lu Tongjia. At first, Lu Tongjia stared back at Hu Jinyao confidently, but in the end, she was defeated by him. She turned her face away, feeling that it was really hard for her to swallow her anger. She couldn't help but stare at Hu Jinyao. What's wrong? Can't I say it? You dared to do it. Why are you afraid that I will say it? Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao worriedly. She subconsciously reached out to hold Hu Jinyao's hand. Hu Jinyao's expression didn't change at all. He just looked at Lu Tongjia calmly. Lu Tongjia became angrier. She turned to Old Master Hua and said, Dad. Tell me. I've been in the Hua family for so many years. When have I ever interfered with Mingguang's business? When have I not stood behind Mingguang, not interfering, not caring? Su Qingsang, on the other hand, interfered with Hu Jinyao's business as soon as she came here. Let me ask you, Dad. Is this reasonable? Is it? Old Master Hu didn't speak. He subconsciously looked at Su Qingsang and said, Qingsang, stand there. Is this true? Grandpa. Su Qingsang bit her lip. This was indeed her fault. I can explain this, She said, I can explain this. Explain. Are you trying to deny it? Lu Tongjia was aggressive. Su Qingsang felt weak. At that time, she was just angry at Ding Qing's provocation. She really didn't expect that it would have such an impact on Hu Jinyao. She couldn't help but look at Old Master Hua and said, Grandpa, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I was. Grandpa. Hu Jinyao grabbed her hand and interrupted Su Qingsang. He glanced at Lu Tongjia, then met Old Master Hua's disapproving look. I did fire Ding Qing. But I didn't fire her because of Qingsang. I fired her because of Ding Qing. She seduced me. Hearing that, Su Qingsang widened her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao. Even Lu Tongjia's expression changed. Hu Jinyao, what are you talking about? How could Ding Qing? Why not? Mom, do you know Ding Qing that well? Lu Tongjia stopped talking and averted her eyes unnaturally. She's your secretary. How could I know her? Old Master Hua looked at Lu Tongjia suspiciously. Lu Tongjia forced herself to calm down and said, Jinyao, don't talk nonsense just because you want to cover up for Su Qingsang. You know very well how Ding Qing left. I know very well indeed. I think you know better than me, don't you? Hu Jinyao added meaningfully. Lu Tongjia looked into his eyes. For a moment, she almost thought that he knew her plan, but then she thought that it was impossible. Of course I know. What you did has spread in the company. Do you think I don't know? Yeah. The news spread everywhere. It's only been 2 days, but you've already heard about it. This is the first time I know that people in our company are so gossipy. Lu Tongjia moved her lips and was about to say something. Hu Jinyao added. Mom, you really care about Ding Qing, don't you? He leaned forward slightly and said in a deep voice, I just don't know if you care about the other employees in our company as well. For example, Qiao Hong. Lu Tongjia's expression changed as soon as she heard Qiao Hong's name. She widened her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao. Her hands were slightly trembling by her sides. However, it was only for a moment. Very quickly, she completely calmed down. Hu Jinyao, why are you talking in such a weird way? I care about Ding Qing only because you've crossed the line. Do you think that I'm interested in just anyone? Really? You've crossed the line to fire one employee. As a subordinate, Ding Qing didn't want to work hard. Isn't that too much? He raised his eyebrows and looked straight into Lu Tongjia's face with his dark eyes. There was a deep meaning in his eyes that only they could understand. Lu Tongjia didn't say anything. She was close to Hu Mingguang, so she had never thought about building her own power in Tianyu Group. If Hu Jinyao hadn't annoyed her this time, she wouldn't have come up with such a plan. The atmosphere between the mother and son was really weird. Su Qingsang wanted to tell the truth, but judging from Hu Jinyao's expression, she felt that there was more to it than meets the eye. Thinking of Ding Qing's provocative words, she believed that Hu Jinyao was probably telling the truth. Ding Qing really wanted to seduce Hu Jinyao, but she didn't succeed. Her eyes suddenly lit up. Did Hu Jinyao want to fire Ding Qing for a long time? Was he just using her as a cover? That's enough. Old Master Hu also noticed that something was wrong. At his age, how could he not see that something was wrong with Lu Tongjia? Ding Qing was probably one of her people. He just didn't know what was wrong with his daughter-in-law. Why was she trying to push someone to her son's side? Shut up, all of you. I still want to live a peaceful life for a few days. I'll ask Uncle Qing to prepare the meal. If you want, you can have a quiet meal with me. If you don't want to, then forget it. Hearing his words, the others stopped talking. Grandpa. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you worry. Hu Jinyao took the initiative to apologize. But don't worry. I'm in charge of the company. I know what I'm doing. As long as you know what you're doing. I believe that you're a good kid. I'll take care of it. Su Qingsang lowered her head and looked down. She thought about what Lu Tongjia and Hu Jinyao had been talking about and felt that something was wrong. However, her grandpa was here, so she couldn't ask. No matter how unhappy Lu Tongjia was, she didn't mention it again since old Master Hu had spoken. Besides, she did feel guilty about what had happened to Qiao Hong. For the rest of the meal, she didn't cause Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang any more trouble. This allowed the two of them to have a quiet meal. In fact, Su Qingsang wanted to ask old Master Hu about what had happened back then. However, today wasn't a good time. She could only wait. After dinner, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao got in the car and left. Almost as soon as they got in the car, Su Qingsang couldn't help but ask, Ding Qing, did you want to fire her for a long time? Hu Jinyao turned his face and said, Honey, what are you talking about? Didn't I fire her because you said you didn't like her? Did you? What else? Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows with a naughty smile on his face. Su Qingsang twitched the corner of her mouth. She didn't believe a word that Hu Jinyao said. All right, honey. It's still early today. Why don't we go watch a movie? Su Qingsang was no longer annoyed by his sudden change of topic. She added coldly, speaking of which, did Ding Qing really seduce you? Hu Jinyao put his foot on the brake and turned to look at Su Qingsang. Honey, I was just joking. Ha. I was joking, too. Su Qingsang smiled at him and said, All right, we're going to watch a movie. Let's go. Yes. Let's go. Chapter 554. Su Peijian looked in the mirror and painted her lips red. Looking at the mirror, he pouted his lips. After confirming that his current appearance was enough to turn the world upside down, he stood up. She put on her coat and looked at herself in the mirror again to make sure that every detail was perfect. Then, she picked up her bag and prepared to go out. However, as soon as she opened the door, she ran into Xiang Kaiping. She stood at the door with her mouth open and was about to call her. "Mom! What are you doing here? It's almost dinner time. Are you going out again?" Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Peijian and asked carefully. "Yes, I have an appointment. I have something to discuss." Xiang Caiping's lips moved, but she swallowed what she wanted to say. "You haven't eaten at home for 3 days. Peijian, Mom, I really have something to discuss. It's not like I'm playing." Su Peijian blinked and looked a little aggrieved. "I just came here and I'm not familiar with this place. I have to make more local friends, right?" Xiang Kaiping looked at her daughter. Her appearance was gorgeous, and her makeup was exquisite. Her clothes were appropriate. If not, she would still be the girl from a rich family in Lin City. She was in a trance for a moment. If she hadn't accepted this daughter as her own, what would she be like now? "Peijian. What's wrong?" Su Peijian's sudden seriousness made Su Peijian retract her slightly careless attitude. The joking expression on her face disappeared. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just feel that you don't want to go back to Lin City." "Mom, why do you say that?" "I'm serious." Xiang Kaiping had thought a lot about it. The more she spent time with Su Peijian, the more she thought about the months she spent with Su Qingsang. She knew it was wrong, but she couldn't help comparing it. Su Peijian didn't like her and couldn't accept her. She knew it all. Her life experience was there, and her feelings and knowledge were there. Especially compared to what Su Qingsang did, and now Su Peijian. She knew it very well. Su Peijian probably didn't want to accept her as her mother. "I always feel that you like Lin City more. Actually, if you really want to go back to Lin City, you can. I'll beg your father and tell him to let you return to Lin City again, Mom." Su Peijian's expression suddenly changed. "What are you talking about?" "I mean it." Xiang Kaiping didn't want to think that way, but Su Peijian was different from Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang had grown up as an illegitimate daughter of the Su family. She had never been loved by Su Qinghui or Li Qinxue. But what about Su Peijian? She was raised in the palms of the Su and Li families. What conditions did the Li family have? What conditions did the Su family have? She could not adapt now, she understood. "Your father owes me something. If I go and save him, trust him, Mom." Su Peijian raised her voice. "If you dare to look for him, I won't recognize you as my mother anymore." Xiang Kaiping was startled by Su Peijian's words, and her expression changed. She stood there, obviously at a loss. Su Peijian cleared her throat, realizing that she had been too aggressive. "Mom. Listen to me, we're fine as we are." It was true. Just the way it is now is good enough. Really? She would be lying if she said she didn't hate Su Qinghui. But she also loved her daughter dearly. Su Peijian suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart and forced a smile on her face. Mom, listen to me. That's what we do now. We mother and daughter depend on each other. As for my father, ever since he kicked me out, I've never been able to forgive him. So, don't say anything like that again." I won't say. Xiang Caiping's expression was a little ingratiating, but it was different from when she was facing Su Qingsang. She was still a little afraid of Su Peijian. "Peijian, can you stop running around outside after you're done with your work?" Su Peijian furrowed her brows. She wanted to retort, but when she saw the perturbed look on Xiang Caiping's face, she didn't say anything. Okay, I got it. I've been busy lately. Don't worry. I will definitely come home more often to accompany you. Is that okay? Okay, okay. Xiang Caiping didn't dare to say anything else. She watched Su Peijian pick up her bag and leave. She leaned against the wall and couldn't help but think of Su Qingsang again. If it were Su Qingsang, she wouldn't just leave her like that, would she? If it were Su Qingsang, she would definitely stay to comfort her. Of course, if it were Su Qingsang, she wouldn't always run around outside. Ever since she recognized her, she stayed at home to accompany her old lady. Realizing what she was thinking, Xiang Caiping's heart felt bitter again. Her hatred for Su Qinghui was really at its peak. It was all his fault. It was all his fault. Su Peijian didn't know the struggle in Xiang Caiping's heart. She got into the car and didn't rush to start it. Instead, she turned around and glanced at Xiang Caiping. Xiang Caiping's words today surprised her. She actually thought that she wanted to go back to Lin City. How could she go back to Lin City now? It wasn't easy for her to get close to Hui Yifan. It was a good time. She didn't want to go back to Lin City. Li Qianxue, Su Qinghui, and even old Master Li. She said it so nicely, saying that she loved her, but in reality, wasn't she just lying to her? If she really loved her, she wouldn't have been kicked out of the house. It was ridiculous that Xiang Caiping still wanted to beg Su Qinghui. Other than Su Qingsang, who had stolen her status, the person she hated the most in her life was Su Qinghui. If he really cared about her, he wouldn't have told anyone about it. Wouldn't it be better to let her be the daughter of the Li family for the rest of her life? It was all Su Qinghui's fault that she was in this situation today. On this point, she and Xiang Caiping were on the same page, which was rare. They both hated Su Qinghui. No matter how emotional she was, when Su Peijian appeared in front of Hui Yifan, she had already composed herself. Su Peijian entered the private room of Xiangshan House and smiled at Hui Yifan, who was sitting in the seat of honor. Mr. Hua. You're here. She walked up and sat down next to him. She looked around and didn't see anyone else. Why are there only two of us? Are the others not here yet? Hui Yifan picked up the teapot on the table and poured her a cup of tea. There's no one else. He moved closer to her with a faint smile on his face. It's just the two of us today. Su Peijian pursed her lips and turned to look at him. She raised her eyebrows and looked very flirtatious. Just the two of us. What do you mean, Mr. Hua? Hui Yifan put down the teapot and put his hand on the back of Su Peijian's hand. Peijian, you're so smart. How can you not know what I mean? Su Peijian gently pulled Hui Yifan's hand away and moved back a little. Mr. Hua, I told you last time. Don't treat me like the women you've met before. I'm not one of those women, Peijian, why do you say that? Can't you see how much I've cared for you these days? Hui Yifan moved closer to her again. He put one hand on the back of the chair and held Su Peijian's hand with the other. Su Peijian didn't move his hand away. Instead, she smiled. Mr. Hua, I'm really flattered by your words. Since Mr. Hua said that you don't treat me like one of those women, do you dare to go home with me to meet my parents? Hui Yifan was stunned for a moment, but only for a moment. Soon, he smiled. Are you sure? Of course. Or do you not dare to? Su Peijian's eyes were provocative. She was beautiful, and looking at people like that would make them look flirtatious. For a moment, Hui Yifan felt a little itchy. He couldn't help but pull her up and let her sit on his lap. If you dare to take me there, I'll go. As Hui Yifan spoke, he raised Su Peijian's chin with one hand. Even if you want to meet my elders, you can. He wasn't talking about meeting her parents, but meeting her elders. That meant two different things. Su Peijian pursed her lips and looked at Hui Yifan. Her eyes flickered. Really? You don't believe me? Hui Yifan chuckled and put his big hand around her waist. Why don't you accompany me home this weekend to meet my grandfather? Your grandfather? Of course. Hui Yifan nodded. On the surface, everything in the Huo family is decided by my uncle. But if something doesn't get my grandfather's approval, I'm afraid it can't be done. Especially when it came to important matters. He glanced at Su Peijian's face and raised the hand that was on her chin again. I think my grandfather will like you very much. The reason why Hu Jinyao could get more points was because he married Su Qingsang and caught the old man's eyes. It was just a woman. If Hu Jinyao could make the old man happy through a woman, he could naturally do it too. What if your grandfather doesn't like me? Su Peijian lowered her head slightly, and his hand happened to touch her lips. She looked up at him and opened her red lips slightly. Just like that, her brightly painted red lips bit his finger. Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes. If it weren't for the inappropriate occasion, he would have taken this woman right now. As long as I like you, that's enough. Su Peijian smiled. Her lips that were gently biting his finger opened slightly. Then, I really have to go see your old man. That's good. I won't let you down, right? Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes and watched her lips move away. Without thinking, he pulled her body closer, lowered his head, and kissed her heavily. Su Peijian didn't let him refuse. She raised her hand and put it around Hui Yifan's neck. As soon as her lips opened, she took the initiative. Hui Yifan's eyes flashed with surprise. More than that, he was pleasantly surprised. He had subdued Su Peijian. The kiss between the two of them was like a competition, and it all depended on who would admit defeat first. After all, Hui Yifan was a veteran in love. In the end, Su Peijian lost. He hugged her body tightly and pressed her waist down. He let her feel the fluctuations of his emotions at that moment. Although she couldn't stand that kiss and withdrew first, he didn't completely win. Peijian. Sooner or later, I will make you mine. Chapter 555. You don't believe me. I do. Su Peijian looked at Hui Yifan's face. To be honest, Hui Yifan wasn't bad looking. Most importantly, she liked the ambition in his eyes. However, I feel that in the end, you might become mine. Really? Why don't we wait and see? Hui Yifan was more and more interested in Su Peijian. No problem. Su Peijian smiled brightly. She thought of something and found it funny. Su Qingsang, aren't you relying on the Huo family? I'll let you know now. You're not the only one who can marry into the Huo family. I can too. I don't know how much the Huo family will be stirred up by the two of us. I'm looking forward to it. Achoo. After dinner, Su Qingsang, who was browsing Weibo in the living room, sneezed. Hu Jinyao turned to look at her. Are you not feeling well? Did you catch a cold? I don't think so. Su Qingsang touched her nose and felt that the sneeze was a bit strange. You don't. I think you caught a cold because you took care of me 2 days ago. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's face and couldn't see anything wrong. Why don't you stop going to work tomorrow and rest at home? You're exaggerating. Su Qingsang glanced at him. I think my mother misses me. I'm going to call my mom later. I don't have anything to do. Why should I rest? Meeting Hu Jinyao's disapproving look, Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh. Don't always think of me as a woman like a doll. I'm in good health. Last time you were sick, I took care of you for so long and slept in the same bed with you. I was fine, wasn't I? Hua Jinyao suddenly approached her and said, Honey, are you asking for credit? Can't I ask for credit? Su Qingsang raised her eyebrows and joked with him. After that day, she didn't ask about Lu Tongjia again. To her, since Hua Jinyao didn't want to talk about it, she wouldn't ask. She didn't want to ask Old Master Hua either. Because she thought of another possibility. If what Lu Tongjia said was true, what should she do? Why did Hua Jinyao have nightmares all these years? After all, he was only 12 years old. If he had done something wrong or said something wrong in a moment of desperation in order to save his own life, wouldn't it be understandable under such circumstances? That day, Old Master Hua looked like he wanted to say something. Did that mean something? Old Master Hua actually knew whether it was possible or not. However, she had already lost 2 grandsons. She didn't want to lose Hua Jinyao as well. After understanding these things, he had these worries in his heart. Su Qingsang didn't want to ask anymore. No matter what choice an underage child made in that kind of situation, she thought, it should be understandable, right? Could they all be forgiven? She could understand Lu Tongjia's stubbornness. So let's leave it at that for now. She looked at Hua Jinyao and put that matter aside. He did not mention that matter at all. She didn't mention it, and neither did Hua Jinyao. The two of them didn't mention that matter, but they felt much closer to each other. Just like now. Hua Jinyao put his mouth close to her ear and said in a low voice, Then, honey, how do you want me to thank you? Su Qingsang felt the heat of his breath brushing against her ear. She shrunk her neck a little. To be honest, Hua Jinyao's masculinity was fatal. Especially when he was talking to her in such a low voice. Stay away from me. I'm afraid I can't. Hua Jinyao put one hand around her waist. Speaking of which, I'm really lucky. I've married such a good wife. How can I not get closer? Don't you think so? Su Qingsang blushed. She put her hands on Hua Jinyao's chest and said, You haven't recovered from your cold yet. Aren't you afraid that I'll infect you? Hua Jinyao kissed her on the lips as if he was teasing her. Because of his playful attitude, Su Qingsang couldn't help but bite his lips. This bite ignited the fire. Hua Jinyao picked her up and put her on his lap. Honey, if you really catch a cold because of me, then you can't blame me. As he spoke, he had already picked up Su Qingsang and walked towards the bedroom. Su Qingsang sat in the car, feeling a little flustered. This feeling came out of nowhere. She subconsciously raised her hand to cover her heart. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Hua Jinyao drove the car. The Hua family's old house was not far ahead. Su Qingsang's expression suddenly changed. He sped up and drove into the Hua family's house. After parking the car, he turned around and looked at her with a worried face. Did I really infect you with a cold? No. Su Qingsang shook her head gently. I don't know why, but I keep feeling flustered. Flustered? Yes. I just feel like something is going to happen. It was such a strange feeling. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao and said, Do you think something will happen? What could happen? He had already driven Ding Qing away. Now, all the people he could use were people he trusted. Hui Yifan had recently negotiated a good project. The contract was about to be signed, and he was almost in a position to do whatever he wanted in the company. His vice president seemed to be more powerful than Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao saw it but didn't say anything. Some things really depended on who could laugh in the end. As for other things, what else could there be? Su Qingsang had just called Li Qianxue yesterday. The company was getting better. She didn't hear anything from Li Qianxue. Nothing. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Let's go. Let's get out of the car. As Su Qingsang spoke, she reached out to push the car door open, and the two of them entered the house together. Not long after they entered the house, a Bugatti Veyron also drove in. That car was Hui Yifun's. Today, the Hua family was all here. Hua Mingguang's family, Hua Mingliang's family, and Hua Mingmei's family were all here. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao weren't the first to arrive. When they entered the house, Hua Mingmei's family was already sitting on the sofa in the living room. When she saw Su Qingsang, the corners of Hua Mingmei's mouth twitched, and an obvious look of disdain flashed across her eyes. However, she had been warned by Old Master Hua recently, so her emotions flashed quickly and were almost invisible. Wei Siming and Wei Sihai wouldn't take the initiative to make friends with Su Qingsang. They were usually close to Hua Manzi. Speaking of which, they could be considered Hua Mingliang's group. Hua Mingliang and his wife, Nian Chunya, Hua Yang, and Hua Manzi sat on the other side. Su Qingsang glanced around and didn't see Hua Yifun, but she didn't care. The Hua family's gathering wasn't always full. She went up and greeted the elders one by one. When facing Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang's expression was still indifferent. Lu Tongjia didn't like her, but she didn't always have to warm up to them. It was rare that Lu Tongjia was easy to talk to. She didn't say sarcastic words like the previous few times. However, Su Qingsang could feel that Lu Tongjia's expression was even more unpleasant. She seemed to have something on her mind. Her face was a little gloomy. Nian Chunya had been talking to her, but she didn't seem to hear her. Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia were sitting together, but there was almost half an arm's length between them. This was also impossible in the past. Could it be that there was something wrong with the couple? She subconsciously glanced at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao gave her a look, signaling her to leave it alone. Of course, Lu Tongjia didn't look good. After all, her plan had been ruined by him. Ding Qing had left, and Lu Tongjia didn't have anyone she could use. She had never wanted to be Wu Zetian before, and she had never placed people in Tianyu group. If she only relied on Hua Mingguang, he would consider the big picture no matter what he wanted to do. Hua Jinyao didn't do much. He just asked someone to more or less tell Hua Mingguang about Xiao Hong. It was true that Hua Mingguang doted on Lu Tongjia, and it was also true that he had feelings for Lu Tongjia. He didn't even stop Lu Tongjia from hurting Hua Jinyao. But it didn't mean that he would let Lu Tongjia do whatever she wanted. There were too many variables in selling the company's secrets, even if it was a lie. What if Xiao Hong wasn't reliable? What if he took the company's secrets and went to a rival company? This time, Hua Mingguang didn't want to help Lu Tongjia. After throwing a tantrum in front of Lu Tongjia spent a lot of effort to pacify Lu Tongjia. However, Hua Mingguang obviously didn't intend to forgive her. The atmosphere between the couple was very low, and everyone could see it. However, Hua Jinyao said not to interfere, so Su Qingsang didn't care. The two of them chose a seat near Old Master Hua and sat down. There was no one else sitting next to Old Master Hua. That seat had always been reserved for Hua Jinyao. He took Su Qingsang to sit next to him, and the others were used to it. However, Hua Manzi couldn't hide the jealousy in her eyes. They were all children of the Hua family. Why did Old Master Hua only love Hua Jinyao? In terms of contributions to the company, her two brothers should have done a lot, right? Hua Jinyao was already used to those people's gazes. He talked to Old Master Hua and didn't care about the others. Su Qingsang sat next to him and occasionally said a few words. Then she heard Uncle Ching say that the second young master was here. The second young master was Hui Yifan. He arrived later than usual. Su Qingsang didn't have a good impression of Hui Yifan, so she was sitting with her back to the door. Hearing Uncle Chang's words, she politely turned her head to look behind her. "I'm sorry. I'm late." Hui Yifan apologized, but the expression on his face was one of pride. "I'm sorry. I should have come earlier, but today is a special day. I have someone to introduce to Grandpa, so I went to pick them up. I was delayed on the way. Grandpa, please don't take it to heart." He seemed to be holding someone's hand and walking inside. He was quite tall. The figure was blocked behind him. Su Qingsang didn't see the person's face at first glance. Chapter 556. Although the Huo family didn't value disciples, they valued rules. Old Master Huo didn't care who Hui Yifan brought back, but he had to inform him in advance. It was a good thing that his grandson had found a girlfriend and was willing to settle down. Old Master Huo was naturally happy. When he asked, he looked behind Hui Yifan. There was a hint of expectation in his eyes. Hui Yifan openly admitted that he was late. "Yes. I went to pick her up just now. Grandpa. This is my girlfriend." As he spoke, Hui Yifan took 2 steps inside. The figure he was holding took a few steps forward because of his movement and walked directly to his side from behind Hui Yifan. It also successfully let everyone see her face clearly. Su Qingsang didn't expect Hui Yifan to choose such a time to bring his girlfriend back to the Huo family. It seemed that he was serious. However, when she saw the face that suddenly appeared at the door, she was completely stunned. At the same time, Hui Yifan said softly to Old Master Huo, "Grandpa, this is Su Peijian. She's my girlfriend." "Peijian, this is my grandpa." "Su Peijian. How could it be Su Peijian?" Su Qingsang couldn't hide the shock on her face. Huo Jinyao also had a flash of surprise in his eyes. Huo Jinyao narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Su Peijian and Hui Yifan with a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Su Peijian took a few steps forward and stood in front of the Huo family. She didn't have stage fright at all. Like Hui Yifan, she looked at Old Master Huo and bowed. "Hello, Grandpa Huo." As she spoke, she took out a not-so-small box from behind her and placed it in front of Old Master Huo. "Grandpa Huo, I don't know what you like. Yifan suddenly said that he wanted to bring me to see you, and I didn't prepare anything. It's just a small gift. Grandpa Huo, I hope you don't mind." Su Peijian's appearance was delicate and pretty. Usually, elders wouldn't like such an appearance. However, before she came today, she deliberately tidied herself up. She was wearing a decent long-sleeve dress with a fragrant blazer on the outside. She looked much more mature, and her attitude was friendly and polite. Old Master Huo had a good impression of her. Good. It's good that he's here. Why is there a need for gifts?" Although he said that, Old Master Huo did not refuse and accepted the gift from the other party. "Of course." Su Peijian hooked her arm around Hui Yifan's. "I often hear Yifan mention you. He often says that the person he admires and respects the most is you, Grandpa. I'm so envious of him for having such a good grandfather." "Really?" Old Master Huo wasn't a person who liked to listen to flattery, but Su Peijian had a sweet tongue and used Hui Yifan to praise him, which made him smile a little more. "Of course it is. After hearing what Yifan said, I can't wait to see you, Grandpa Huo." Su Peijian nodded heavily. There was not a trace of arrogance on her face, not even a trace of the arrogance she had when she was with Hui Yifan. Her eyes were gentle, and her voice was sweet. She looked like a well-bred lady from a respectable family. Seeing this, Hui Yifan, who had been a little worried before, completely relaxed. From the corner of his eye, he couldn't help but look in Hui Jinyao's direction. He wasn't the only one who had a taste for women. His taste was not worse than Hui Jinyao's. It wasn't that Hui Jinyao hadn't interacted with Su Peijian before. In the few times they had met, Su Peijian either had a high and mighty look on her face, or she looked flustered and exasperated because she failed to deal with them. Not to mention him, even Su Qingsang, who grew up with Su Peijian, had never seen her like this before. At this time, she looked at her half-sister. No, she should be his younger sister now. She couldn't help but be speechless. What was Su Peijian trying to do? When Hui Yifan turned his face, he happened to see Hui Jinyao and Su Qingsang's shocked expressions. He felt a burst of pride in his heart, and he couldn't help but look a little smug. However, there were more important things in front of him. Hui Yifan didn't want to be entangled with these two couples that he disliked. Peijian, come, let me introduce you to the other members of the Hui family. Okay. Su Peijian nodded. The smile at the corner of her mouth suddenly changed when she saw Su Qingsang sitting next to Hui Jinyao. Sister. After saying this, she immediately covered her mouth, as if she realized that she had said something wrong. She suddenly looked at Hui Yifan helplessly. That, sister, wasn't a soft call. Moreover, no matter how big the living room was, the group of people sitting together naturally heard it clearly. What did you call her? Hui Yifan was stunned for a moment, and his somewhat suspicious gaze fell between Su Qingsang and Su Peijian. He seemed to have just realized that Su Peijian's surname was Su, and Su Qingsang's surname was also Su. His expression changed for a moment. Su Peijian seemed to be frightened. She looked at Su Qingsang and said, I'm sorry, Miss Su. I shouldn't have called you sister. As she spoke, her body leaned against Hui Yifan's side without a trace, and her face seemed to be a little scared. Su Qingsang sat there without moving, just watching Su Peijian act there as if she was directing and acting herself. She had never seen Su Peijian act like this before. But now she had a rough idea of what Su Peijian was doing. Hui Jinyao sat next to Su Qingsang and reached out to gently pinch her palm. Su Qingsang glanced at him, and her fluctuating emotions strangely calmed down in an instant. No matter what Su Peijian wanted to do, she would just take it. Peijian, what the hell is going on? Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes. He looked at Su Qingsang, and then at Su Peijian. Su Peijian's arrogance and domineering attitude from before, and her delicate side in front of Hui Yifan was like a little wife. Especially the way she looked at Su Qingsang, there was a hint of fear in her eyes. Su Qingsang didn't say anything and watched Su Peijian act. Her mood had calmed down, and she was in the mood to watch her act. Really, she had never thought that Su Peijian had such acting skills before. It was a pity that she didn't enter the entertainment industry. Hui Jinyao and his wife weren't the only ones staring at Su Peijian, the others were also staring at her. Hui Mingmei narrowed her eyes, as if she wanted to watch a good show. Lu Tongjia had been scolded by Hui Mingwang recently, and this made her feel even worse. She didn't like Su Qingsang, but she didn't like Su Peijian's attitude of not finishing her words. Su Peijian also knew that she couldn't keep people in suspense. Looking at Su Qingsang, she didn't hesitate and directly told the answer. Chapter 557. She's my sister. Su Peijian didn't look at Su Qingsang as she spoke. She bit her lip and looked hesitant. She seemed to be in a dilemma. Sister. The other members of the Hui family all pricked up their ears and stared at Su Peijian. Hui Manzi and Wei Siming looked at each other and looked at Su Qingsang as if they were watching a good show. She's your sister. The smile on old Master Hua's face faded a little. He knew about Su Qingsang's background. Someone who could call Su Qingsang's sister must be, she used to be my sister. Then she was my sister. But Su Peijian bit her lip. She looked so wronged. She didn't look like the arrogant young lady of the Su family. She looked at Hui Yifan with an ambiguous look. Now, my sister probably doesn't want to acknowledge me. What she said was a little heart-wrenching. Su Qingsang sat there and didn't move. She didn't even make a sound. Hui Yifan looked at Su Qingsang and was a little surprised by her calmness. After thinking for a while, he suddenly spoke. What did you do? You made sister-in-law not acknowledge you. Su Peijian shook her head gently and didn't want to say more. I don't know what I did wrong. I only know that after my sister married President Hua, my parents acknowledged her and then kicked me out of the house. Su Peijian was telling the truth, but not the whole truth. However, as soon as she finished speaking, everyone looked at Su Qingsang. They were all smart people and could understand what Su Peijian meant almost immediately. To put it bluntly, the Su family was just a greedy and snobbish family. However, this also showed one thing, and that was that Su Qingsang was very capable. Otherwise, why would they not even acknowledge their own daughter? Hua Mingmei looked at Su Qingsang. She knew that this woman was not simple. Hua Manzi and the other juniors looked at each other, and when they looked at Su Qingsang again, their expressions changed. It was really a black bottle of soy sauce. They couldn't tell. I remember that sister-in-law seems to be an illegitimate daughter, right? As an illegitimate daughter, she didn't acknowledge her own sister. Hui Yifan's eyes flickered, and the meaning in his eyes was unclear. Illegitimate daughter. Who is the illegitimate daughter now? Su Qingsang didn't want to argue. After all, her biological father swapped the identities of his two daughters in a fit of anger was not very honorable. She had never thought of revealing this matter. No matter what, Su Qinghui was her biological father. This sister-in-law is really amazing. Hui Yifan didn't dare to say anything. Others didn't dare to say it, but it didn't mean that he didn't dare to say it either. Why is her identity different after marrying Big Brother? The others didn't respond, but Hua Mingmei didn't care. She was an elder. Speaking of which, I was surprised last time. Then why did the Su family come personally to pay a visit? Wasn't it just marrying an illegitimate daughter? Such a grand ceremony is really... He didn't finish his sentence, but no one was a fool. They all understood what he meant. Just as Hu Jinyao was about to say something, Su Qingsang pressed the back of his hand. This was her business. She didn't need Hu Jinyao's endorsement. Peijian. Grandpa misses you very much. He kept talking about you on his last birthday. Unfortunately, you didn't go. She didn't say how Su Peijian left, nor did she say whether Su Peijian was kicked out. It was enough for him to say this. Sure enough, Su Peijian's expression suddenly changed. Speaking of leaving the Li family, if there was anything she couldn't bear to part with, it was old Master Li. She knew that the old man really loved her. She actually knew about old Master Li's last birthday. She also thought about whether she should go back to Lin City to visit old Master Li, even if it was just a phone call. But in the end, she couldn't pass her own test. She didn't want to return to the Li family in such a miserable way. To put it bluntly, she didn't want people's sympathy. Especially from the sympathy and charity from the Li family. Grandpa has always missed you. Su Qingsang's voice was calm. His last birthday wasn't a big party, and he didn't invite many people. He just wanted to have a family dinner together. Su Qingsang sighed softly, and her expression seemed to be a little emotional. But it's a pity that the family didn't come together. His birthday wasn't a perfect one. These days, she often contacted Li Qianxue and Su Yusin. Li Qianxue wouldn't take the initiative to mention Su Peijian in front of her, but Su Yusin had mentioned it a few times. More than 20 years of feelings couldn't be lost just because you said so. But Su Peijian could be so cold-hearted. Not only did she not visit, she didn't even call. How could Li Qianxue accept this? How could she not be disappointed? No matter how much she missed Su Peijian, she wouldn't take the initiative to contact her. First, Li Qianxue was an elder, and Su Peijian was a junior. If Su Peijian really recognized the Li family, she would take the initiative to contact them. Second, she didn't want to hurt Su Qingsang's heart again. Third, she didn't want Su Qinghui to be complacent. She didn't want Su Qinghui to think that he still had the power to balance her. Putting these reasons together, Li Qianxue couldn't contact Su Peijian, but she also didn't want to refuse Su Peijian's return. Even if Su Peijian recognized Xiang Kaiping, as long as she was willing to return to the Li family, there would definitely be a place for her in the Li family. These were all slowly figured out by Su Qingsang later. Su Peijian wasn't stupid. Of course, she could hear it. Feeling everyone's gaze on her, she lowered her head, her half-lidded eyes concealing all her emotions. I thought there was no place for me in the family. I also thought that Grandpa wouldn't want to see me. After all. At this time, Su Peijian's eyes were already red. Mom said that she didn't have a daughter like me. She said that her daughter was you. She looked up at Su Qingsang, still unable to hide the grievance in her eyes. Sister, I know you're better than me. You married President Hua, so you're the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. It's normal that Mom doesn't like me. Su Qingsang suddenly felt a little upset. What nonsense was Su Peijian talking about? Why didn't she say that the reason why Li Qianxue didn't recognize her was because of Su Qinghui? Now she was insisting that she couldn't refute it. After all, she didn't want to ruin Su Qinghui's reputation. Su Peijian looked at Su Qingsang and didn't say anything. A trace of pride flashed in the depths of her eyes, and she turned to look at Hu Yifan. I'm sorry, Yifan. I think that you might not want to see me. I'd better leave first. Su Qingsang hadn't even said a word, and she had already put such a big blame on her in one breath. Hua Jinyao watched Su Peijian put on a pitiful look in front of the other Hua family members, and then looked at Hu Yifan. At the beginning, he was shocked, but now he looked serious on the surface, but deep in his eyes, he looked like he was watching a good show. That was also true. He and Su Qingsang had a tacit understanding about Su Qinghui, so he naturally knew what Su Qingsang was worried about. Unfortunately, she had concerns, but he didn't. Don't you know why the Li family doesn't recognize you? Su Qingsang suddenly looked at Hua Jinyao, wanting to stop him. However, Hua Jinyao wouldn't let his wife be put in a difficult position without doing anything. Why doesn't the Su family recognize you? Su Peijian, don't you dare to say it now. Su Peijian had always known that her identity wouldn't be a secret. If she really wanted to investigate, she would find out. However, she thought that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao didn't say it before because they had concerns. She didn't expect Hua Jinyao to ignore it. I don't know. She forced herself to calm down and looked at Hua Jinyao with her red eyes without blinking. I only know that ever since my sister married you, the Li family has been messed up by the two of you. I only know that because of you, my sister has confidence and courage. She also has the ability to make my parents kick me out of the family. There was no need to say the rest. Su Peijian had made it clear enough. She turned to look at Su Qingsang. I'm sorry, sister. I also know that you don't want to see me again. But Yifan and I, we can't help it. She turned to look at Hu Yifan with a pained expression. I'm sorry, Yifan. I know that you really want to marry me, so you brought me back to the Huo family to see your grandfather. But I lied to you. I'm actually not the eldest daughter of the Su family. I've been kicked out of the Su family. I'm just an abandoned daughter of the Su family now. Her eyes were red and filled with tears. The expression on her face was so aggrieved and pained. Huo Jinyao had never seen Su Peijian like this. He only felt that she was a completely different person from the beautiful woman who had sat on his lap. Even the way they talked was different. Su Peijian had never said that she was the eldest daughter of the Su family. When she appeared in front of him, her identity became a mystery. Hui Yifan had thought of investigating her, but he preferred to conquer her first. He enjoyed the feeling of conquering, and he was also confident that everything was under his control. So when Su Peijian said that, he almost immediately realized what was going on. Peijian, please don't say that. I believe that you didn't do it on purpose. Su Peijian's lips moved. She seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Hui Yifan held her hand. It's not your fault that you were kicked out of the Su family. It's not your fault that they abandoned you. It's someone else's fault. There was no need to say who that someone else was. I like you as a person, not because of your identity. I believe that Grandpa won't care about your identity. Grandpa, don't you think so? He turned to look at old Master Hua with a sincere expression. He stood in front of Su Peijian, looking as if he would go through thick and thin with her. He looked so sincere that even Su Peijian couldn't tell if he was serious or just acting. The other members of the Hua family couldn't tell. However, everyone was looking at the two of them. From time to time, they would turn their eyes back to Huo Jinyao and his wife. Chapter 558. Others didn't know about Su Qingsang's family background, but old Master Hua did. Huo Jinyao had told him about it as soon as he came back. Su Qingsang didn't say it out loud because she wanted to save Su Qinghui's face. But this Su Peijian, now that Su Qingsang had become the eldest daughter of the Su family, Su Peijian would naturally become an illegitimate daughter. He had no problem with illegitimate daughters, and he could understand Su Qinghui's behavior of exchanging two children in a fit of anger. But now that he saw Su Peijian, old Master Hua had a different opinion of the Su family. It doesn't matter if you recognize your biological daughter, but this isn't your biological daughter. No matter what, you have raised her by your side for so many years. There must be feelings, right? Why did he have feelings for her? How could he be chased out so easily? He didn't think that what the Su family did was necessarily wrong. After all, Su Qinghui had lied to her for so many years. It was normal for her to refuse to acknowledge her daughter. But it was still a little cold. Of course, Su Qingsang might have played a part in it. Just as Su Peijian had said, Su Qingsang married Huo Jinyao. Then, Huo Jinyao would become Su Qingsang's backer. Perhaps it was because they had such a backer that the Su family was so heartless. Half of it was to please Su Qingsang, and the other half was because he disliked Su Qinghui. Old Master Huo remained silent. For the other few hours, he naturally did not speak either. Huo Jinyao narrowed his eyes and glanced at Su Peijian. He had underestimated this woman. Su Peijian didn't mention that she was now an illegitimate daughter of the Su family. If he hadn't told his grandfather about it, he would have thought that the Su family was the kind of family that didn't recognize their own daughter in order to get on the Huo family's good side. What he didn't know was that although old Master Huo didn't think that way now, he more or less had some opinions about Su Qingsang and the Su family. So what if she was an illegitimate daughter? How many families in Rome City had illegitimate children? However, no one would raise an illegitimate daughter in their own home. If they really raised her by their side, then there was absolutely no reason to chase her out. Old Master Huo glanced at Hui Yifan. His voice was not as light as it had been when Su Peijian first came in. Feelings are your own business. I won't interfere with you. It's fine as long as you think it's good. This meant that he had no objections. Hua Jinyao glanced at old Master Hua. There was nothing wrong with his grandfather's attitude. If Hui Yifan wanted to be with someone, they were in no position to object. Hua Jinyao knew that, and so did Su Qingsang. However, neither of them were in a good mood. Especially Su Qingsang. Su Peijian never said the real reason why she was kicked out of the Li family. People who didn't know the truth might really think that it was because Hua Jinyao married her. Also, Su Peijian had been avoiding the question of her identity. She did not reveal her identity as an illegitimate daughter, only saying that she was a daughter who was chased out of the Su family. She wanted to clarify things with Su Peijian, but when she met old Master Hua's gaze, she couldn't bring herself to say anything else. Grandpa Hua didn't object to Su Peijian joining the Hua family, which meant that he accepted Su Peijian as a member of his family. If she opened her mouth now, she was afraid that the old man would be unhappy. She turned to look at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao's expression was a little ugly. He looked at Su Peijian and was about to refute her words. Su Qingsang held his hand and gently shook her head at him. Some things needed to be fought for, but some things there was no need. Since Su Peijian said that she was a daughter of the Su family, then she was. She was a daughter of the Su family. If Su Peijian wanted to be with Hui Yifan, then let them be. Except for Su Peijian, no one else present saw Su Qingsang's action. Su Peijian lowered her head to hide the pride in her heart. She didn't need to do more today. She just needed to plant a seed in Su Qingsang's mind, a seed of doubt. As for the rest, she would leave it to time. Now, her show wasn't over yet. Nian Chunya and Hua Mingliang were Hua Yifan's parents, but now Grandpa Hua didn't object. Naturally, they couldn't say anything. Nian Chunya didn't come from a rich family, so she always liked to compare herself to Lu Tongjia. In the past years, she had been suppressed by Lu Tongjia. When people talked about the Hua family's madam, very few people mentioned Nian Chunya, but everyone knew Lu Tongjia. Of course, it was also because of her husband. After all, Hua Mingliang was not as capable as his brother. He was only a director in Tianyu Group, but he had always been doing nothing. Lu Tongjia was indeed a scheming person. She had fought with Lu Tongjia several times, both openly and secretly, but she had always been defeated. She was holding back her anger in her heart. She was thinking about how to suppress Lu Tongjia. However, Lu Tongjia was stronger than her in every aspect. When it came to children, she gave birth to 3 children, and so did Lu Tongjia. She had 2 boys and 1 girl, and Lu Tongjia had 2 boys and 1 girl. To be honest, when the incident happened, she felt a little lucky. She felt lucky that Hua Jinkai died early. Otherwise, Hua Jinkai would be much more favored than the 2 of them. Of course, Nian Chunya never dared to show such thoughts in front of the other members of the Hua family. Especially after old Master Hua explicitly forbade them from mentioning Hua Jinkai and his sister, it became a taboo in the Hua family. They couldn't mention it again. Hui Yifan was only 2 years older than Hua Jinyao. She had thought it was better. Hua Jinyao was not a serious person. He liked to play around. She could see that when he was young. With Hua Jinkai gone, Hui Yifan would have a chance. However, after Hua Jinkai left, Hua Jinyao seemed to have changed into a different person. He skipped a grade, went abroad to study, and took over the company. Old Master Hua was full of praises for him. He had suppressed Hui Yifan and his sister. Lu Tongjia only had 1 son left. Speaking of which, there was nothing to be proud of at all. However, he had risen to the top and gained old Master Hua's favor. Don't you think that old Master Hua is biased? Now, Su Qingsang's parents kicked her sister out just because she married Hua Jinyao. What did that mean? Hua Jinyao had his ways. Su Peijian was not so good. Her silly son had thrown away someone who didn't want him. Thinking of this, Nian Chunya's face darkened. When Su Peijian came over to greet them, her expression was indifferent, and it was obvious that she was unhappy. Su Peijian didn't mind being treated coldly. She still greeted Hua Mingliang and Nian Chunya with the same attitude. Then, Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia, then Hua Mingmei and Wei Nantian, and then the younger members of the family. In terms of etiquette, Su Peijian, who had been carefully trained by Li Qianxue, was absolutely impeccable. When Lu Tongjia saw Su Peijian earlier, she didn't think much of her. But after watching the good show just now, she finally understood what was going on. Chapter 559. Su Qingsang and Su Peijian didn't look like sisters. They looked more like enemies. Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang and then at Su Peijian. For the first time, she looked at Su Peijian seriously. Before Su Peijian came, she had asked Hui Yifan about the Hua family. Hui Yifan also told her about Hua Mingguang and his wife, Hua Mingliang and his wife, and Hua Mingmei's family. However, Hui Yifan didn't have time to tell her that Lu Tongjia didn't like Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang. However, she had been observing Lu Tongjia and Su Qingsang since she came in. After observing for so long, she could basically make a judgment. If Nian Chunya didn't like her, then Lu Tongjia didn't like Su Qingsang either. Su Peijian finally had a smile on her face since she came to the Hua family. Su Qingsang, do you really think it's so easy to be the daughter-in-law of a rich family? You're really too naive. The elders didn't show it on their faces, but the younger generation had different thoughts. The routine dinner party began in such a strange atmosphere. Su Peijian knew that the real person in the family was old Master Hua. Therefore, after sitting down, she didn't mention her family background. She only picked some interesting things to get close to old Master Hua. Old Master Hua still had some sympathy for Su Peijian. It was true that he liked Su Qingsang, but that didn't stop him from sympathizing with Su Peijian. The roles had been reversed. She was originally the daughter of a rich family, but now she had become an illegitimate daughter. Not everyone could bear this kind of disparity. Su Peijian showed a little dissatisfaction at the beginning, and then didn't mention it again. In old Master Hua's eyes, it was a sign of her true nature. After all, it was impossible to say that she didn't care at all after such a thing happened. However, it wasn't appropriate to keep harping on the past. It was just right like this. Hui Yifan had been paying attention to old Master Hua's expression. He was surprised and proud that Su Peijian could please old Master Hua. See, Hua Jinyao wasn't the only one who knew how to pick women. He knew how to pick women too. Nian Chunya didn't like Su Peijian at first, but seeing that she could please old Master Hua, she stopped looking down on Su Peijian. Hua Yiyang knew what had happened to Su Peijian in the past. This woman's current behavior was completely different from before, and he was greatly impressed. I didn't expect my brother's taste to be so good. She found Su Qingsang's sister as soon as she started searching. The meal was especially quiet. Silence referred to the others. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao were also watching Su Peijian's performance. Su Peijian had been with old Master Li since she was a child. If she wanted to please an elder, it would be a piece of cake for her. In the beginning, old Master Hua only felt pity for her, but after the meal, it became 60%. It was getting late by the time they finished eating. Su Peijian was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, she said that she wanted to play chess with old Master Hua. When I was at home, I often played with my grandfather. Su Qingsang sat next to Hu Jinyao and watched Su Peijian play chess with Old Master Hua. The two of them went back and forth. Her chess skills were not bad. After a while, Old Master Hua became serious. His love for Su Peijian had become 80%. Su Qingsang watched as Old Master Hua changed his attitude towards Su Peijian in a short period of time. She was not jealous, but she remembered something. Li Qianxue truly loved Su Peijian. Although she spoiled her, she had also raised her according to the standards of a lady from a wealthy family. The four arts, chess, calligraphy, and painting, as well as the ways of the world. Those were things that she had missed and could not make up for. Li Qianxue's painstaking efforts over the past 20 years had been exchanged for Su Peijian. But now, Su Peijian, she had mixed feelings until she left the Hua family and got into Hu Jinyao's car. Are you unhappy? Hu Jinyao had noticed that Su Qingsang's expression was not good. Do you not want Su Peijian to enter the Hua family? Su Peijian was in the limelight today. In the previous game of chess, she lost the first game, drew the second game, and actually beat Old Master Hua in the third game. In recent years, there were not many people who could beat Old Master Hua. Su Peijian actually won, which undoubtedly greatly improved her impression in front of Old Master Hua. Qingsang, don't worry. Even if she really gets together with Hui Yifan, it won't affect anything. Compared to Hui Yifan, he was Old Master Hua's most beloved eldest grandson. With him around, Hui Yifan couldn't beat him, so naturally, Su Peijian couldn't beat Su Qingsang either. Moreover, it was her first day at home, so Old Master Hua had to give her and Hui Yifan some face. I'm not worried about that. Su Qingsang shook her head. Although Grandpa can go to his old friends and granduncle when he has nothing to do, he still likes the younger generation to come back to see him often. I'm happy for Grandpa that Su Peijian can win Grandpa's favor. But today, there are some things that can't be argued over in one day. I know her purpose. She just wants to ruin my reputation. She hates my father now. I can't just ignore it and ruin my father's reputation. What makes me uncomfortable is her attitude towards Grandpa and my mother. The better Su Peijian behaved, the more it showed how much effort Li Qianxue had put in to nurture her. There were many things that she could see with her own eyes. She used to envy Su Peijian for being raised by Li Qianxue. If Su Peijian didn't have Li Qianxue and Su Qinghue's wholehearted training, she wouldn't have become what she was now, and she wouldn't have been able to win Old Master Hua's favor so easily. But all of that came from the Li family. However, she could completely cast aside the Li family after finding out about her family background. My mother raised her for more than 20 years. Even if my mother was angry at Su Qinghui, she still cared about her reputation. She didn't make her background public. My mother always cared about her mother-daughter relationship with Su Peijian. But Su Peijian obviously didn't. That was also why she didn't argue with Su Peijian today. Speaking of which, both Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui still had feelings for Su Peijian. If she went too far, it would only hurt the elders' hearts in the end. More importantly, she didn't want to hurt Xiang Caiping's heart. You're too kind. Hu Jinyao didn't agree with Su Qingsang's idea. This was her decision, and he couldn't oppose it. I don't believe you don't know that she deliberately picked Hui Yifan to target you. I know. How could Su Qingsang not know? I won't do anything before she takes the initiative. Hu Jinyao didn't agree. He had wanted to see what Su Peijian was doing before, but he thought that she was still in Lin City, so he didn't investigate. Now that she was in Rome City, and it was obvious that she was targeting Su Qingsang, there was no reason for him not to make a move. I only know that the first to strike has the upper hand. Mom won't agree. Su Qingsang glanced at Hu Jinyao. My parents still have feelings for Su Peijian. What's more, there's Aunt Xiang. Hu Jinyao didn't need to say the rest. He looked at Su Qingsang and reached out to gently hug her. Don't worry, I won't let her hurt you. Don't worry, I won't let her hurt me. I won't give her the chance. Hu Jinyao nodded, but he had made up his mind. He would find a chance to tell Yang Wenchang to have someone keep an eye on Su Peijian. He always felt that Su Peijian had a trick up her sleeve. Especially now that she was in cahoots with Hui Yifan, she was most likely up to no good. He wasn't worried that old Master Huo would favor them, nor was he worried that Su Peijian and Hui Yifan would really marry and enter the Huo family. He was worried that Su Peijian had ulterior motives. Getting close to Hui Yifan and entering the Huo family would undoubtedly give her more opportunities to get close to Su Qingsang. There would be more things she could do in the future. And Hu Jinyao didn't want to see that situation. After Hui Yifan left the Huo family, he didn't listen to Su Peijian and send her home. Instead, he parked the car in front of his apartment. Su Peijian sat in the car and didn't plan to get out. What is Hu Xiao trying to do? Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes and looked at her. He didn't speak, nor did he get out of the car. Su Peijian had just played a few games of chess with old Master Hua, and Su Qingsang left before them. She chatted with Hui Yifan for a while. After she made old Master Hua happy, she left the Hua family. Hui Yifan's apartment was in the opposite direction of Xiang Caiping's villa. Sitting in the car, she saw Hui Yifan's expression and couldn't help but laugh. She didn't have the gentle concern she had when she was facing old Master Hua. Instead, she looked as innocent as a white rabbit. She moved slightly closer to Hui Yifan, tilted her face, and flipped her slightly curled long hair to the side. President Hua, are you not satisfied with my performance today? How could that be? Hui Yifan took the opportunity to put his arm around Su Peijian's waist and stared at her face. I'm satisfied. I'm very satisfied. Why can't I see that? Hui Yifan stared at Su Peijian's face and bit down on her lip, neither too lightly nor too heavily. You used me today. Did you have a good time? I don't quite understand what Hu Xiao is saying. How is it using me? The lights in the car were dim. Su Peijian bit her lips. Her scarlet lips looked especially charming in this kind of night. You didn't tell me before that you are Su Qingsang's sister. Well, you didn't ask me. Su Peijian raised her eyebrows and smiled faintly. Besides, aren't you using me too? She was referring to the time when he used her to please old Master Hua. If they were really talking about using each other, they were about the same. Neither of them could blame the other. Woman. You've pissed me off. It was true that he wanted to take her home to meet old Master Hua, but that was because he didn't know her identity, and he didn't know that she had deliberately approached him. Chapter 560. He didn't know that she was Su Qingsang's sister, that she was the daughter of the Su family, and that she had been kicked out of the Su family. Of course, he didn't care about that identity, but the Su family had kicked Su Peijian out to please Su Qingsang. He felt a little uncomfortable when he compared himself to her. Mr. Hua, you're wrongly accusing me. I remember I asked you before, didn't I? I asked you if you dared to meet my parents with me. You said you dared. Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes and stared at Su Peijian's face. Did you approach me on purpose for Su Qingsang? Didn't you also use me on purpose for Hu Jinyao? Su Peijian's counterattack made Hui Yifan feel a little suffocated. Woman, I don't like to be used. If you're used, it means that you're still valuable. What's more, Su Peijian put her hand on Hui Yifan's chest. We're not just using you. We're using each other. Isn't that right? Hui Yifan didn't speak. He felt a little uncomfortable. Su Peijian changed the topic at that moment. Your aunt doesn't seem to like my sister, does she? Hui Yifan looked at her with a cunning look in his eyes. What do you want to do? Mr. Hua, you should ask what we want to do. Su Peijian approached Hui Yifan with a smile. Her red lips opened and closed, but the words she said were full of calculation. You don't like Hui Jinniao, and I don't like Su Qingsang. Do you know Hui Jinniao's weakness? It's Su Qingsang. If Su Qingsang had anything, would Hui Jinniao still have the mood to fight with you? Would he still have the mood to sit as the president of Tianyu Group? She didn't need to say the rest. Hui Yifan was a smart man, so he naturally understood what she meant. Looking at the smugness in her eyes, he suddenly tightened his hand on her waist. Has anyone ever told you that you're a bad woman? No, you're the first. Su Peijian smiled and put her arms around his neck. Has anyone ever told you that you're a bad man? I don't think so. As Su Peijian said this, she kissed him on the lips. So, the two of us, bad men and bad women, just happened to be a match made in heaven. Just as she was about to step back, Hui Yifan grabbed her waist. He trapped her in his arms again. A pair made in heaven. Isn't it? Yes. Hui Yifan didn't finish his sentence. Instead, he kissed Su Peijian's lips savagely. Only when Su Peijian was out of breath did he pull back slightly, but he didn't let go. Since we are a match made in heaven, let us bring disaster to the world together. Sure. Su Peijian's lips curled into a smile. I like this word. Is that so? Then let's make a little. Something you like better. Hui Yifan got out of the car as he spoke. He walked to the other side of the car door and carried Su Peijian out. Su Peijian didn't flinch this time. She let him carry her upstairs. That night, Su Peijian didn't go home. Is the work in the hospital too tiring recently? Why do I see that you don't look so good? Li Qianxue, who was video chatting with Su Qingsang, noticed the dark circles under Su Qingsang's eyes. No. Maybe I didn't sleep well last night. Su Peijian suddenly showed up yesterday. Su Qingsang wasn't afraid of her. She was just wondering if she should tell Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui about it. Like Hui Jinniao, she didn't think that Su Peijian was harmless. She suddenly showed up with Hui Yifan. She must have a purpose. The most likely reason was that she was here for her. However, she didn't know what Su Peijian wanted to do. Yesterday. Li Qianxue counted the days. She knew that Su Qingsang and Hui Jinniao went to the Hua mansion every weekend. Did Hui Jinniao's mother make things difficult for you again? No. What are you talking about, Mom? Lu Tongjia had been very quiet yesterday. She was a little confused by Lu Tongjia's quiet behavior. Lu Tongjia was so quiet that it wasn't like her at all. Her mother isn't that kind of unreasonable person. At most, she would just ignore me. It's better if she doesn't talk to you. You don't talk to her either. Li Qianxue couldn't bear to see her daughter being bullied, especially when she thought of Lu Tongjia's face. She had just recognized her daughter, and she hadn't loved her enough yet. Why were Lu Tongjia's eyes and nose not her nose? Mom. Why are you like a child? Li Qianxue was a little embarrassed. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. She had been a little grumpy recently. After all, it was that bastard Su Qinghui's fault. Even if they were divorced, so be it. Everything was fine, but now he was acting like he regretted it in front of her and pretending that he still had feelings for her. He didn't find it annoying, but she found it annoying. The key was that she didn't know where he learned to be so thick-skinned. He always used Su Yusin's name to come to her. She hated that her daughter wasn't by her side, but she still had to worry about her son. Su Qinghui thought that he could enter the house, but he didn't know that because of his actions, Li Qianxue now hated him more and more. Li Qianxue naturally wouldn't say these things in front of Su Qingsang. I'm just anxious and worried for you. You see, you're alone over there, and I can't help you much. If anything happens, you still have to rely on yourself. I'm feeling wronged for you. Mom. I'm not wronged. Su Qingsang really didn't feel wronged. Lu Tongjia's expression was ugly. Speaking of it, it was not much different from how Li Qianxue treated her back then. And the relatives of the Li family. Sometimes, she felt lucky that she had been through the lowest point of her life. Lu Tongjia's words didn't affect her at all. To be honest, she was more worried about Hu Jinyao. In fact, as long as Hu Jinyao is good to me, the two of us can live our own lives. Even if there was a lot of trouble in the Hu family, as long as Hu Jinyao was with her, she would feel that nothing mattered. Li Qianxue naturally knew this, but she said, Qingsang, it's really not that I'm trying to persuade you. You're not old, but you're not young either. I don't mean anything else, and I'm not urging you to have children. I just think that if you have children, maybe the Hu family will change their attitude for the sake of their grandson. What do you think? To be honest, Li Qianxue actually didn't want Su Qingsang to have children under such circumstances. What would happen then? Would Su Qingsang rely on having children to stabilize her position? Would she rely on having children to improve the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law? As soon as Li Qianxue thought of this, she felt wrong for Su Qingsang. However, she also knew that this was the simplest and most direct way. Give birth to the fourth generation of the Hu family, whether it was Hu Mingguang or Lu Tongjia. For the sake of the children, they would definitely not make things difficult for Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. She thought of Hu Jinyao's attitude on this matter several times. Mom, I'm still young. There's no rush. Li Qianxue wanted to persuade her again, but in the end, she still felt sorry for her daughter and stopped talking about children. After ending the call, Su Qingsang put her phone aside and looked at the half-empty bed. She knew that what Li Qianxue said made sense. Although it wasn't the best solution, it was indeed the easiest step to solve the bad relationship between Hu Jinyao and Lu Tongjia. However, this matter had never been decided by her alone. In fact, since last time, she had vaguely felt that Hu Jinyao probably didn't want to have children. She could tell from the fact that even when he was in a trance, he didn't forget to take contraceptives. Hu Jinyao didn't want children. At first, she had always thought that he was so careful about contraceptives because she didn't want to have children. However, slowly, as time passed, especially when she explicitly hinted several times. However, when Hu Jinyao pretended that he didn't understand, she realized. She didn't understand why before, but after seeing what Lu Tongjia had done, she was afraid that the knot in Hu Jinyao's heart was still because of Lu Tongjia. If she could solve the knot between Lu Tongjia and Hu Jinyao, didn't that mean that this matter was half resolved? Su Qingsang thought of it and did it. Hu Jinyao had something to do today. She could use this time to ask old Master Hu again. An hour later, Su Qingsang stood in the living room of the Hu family's old house. Uncle Cheng was a little surprised to see her. Yesterday, Hu Jinyao didn't stay in the old house. He only said that he had an international meeting this morning and left with Su Qingsang. He didn't expect that Su Qingsang would come again today. Young mistress, you're back. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. I'm looking for Grandpa. Where is he? Grandpa is playing with the parrot in the back. Thinking of this, Uncle Ching smiled. Grandpa likes that parrot very much. He plays with it when he has nothing to do. The parrot is quarreling in front of others, but it has a lot to say to Grandpa. Then I'll go to the backyard to find Grandpa. After saying that, Su Ching-sang walked to the back. Uncle Ching wanted to say that there were guests in the backyard, but Su Ching-sang walked so fast that he didn't have time to say it. Before Su Ching-sang reached the yard, she heard old Master Hua's voice. She thought that he was chatting with the parrot, so she didn't think much and walked straight up. Grandpa, Yuan, when he saw the person standing next to old Master Hua, he swallowed his words and nodded at that person. Uncle. Zhang Yichen looked at Su Ching-sang. The temperature in Rong City had risen a lot. It was the end of spring. Even though it wasn't warm, the temperature had begun to rise. Su Ching-sang was wearing a red long-sleeved dress today. Su Ching-sang's facial features were actually pretty and elegant. However, the red dress suited her very well. It made her look more lively than usual. Especially when she tied her long hair into a ponytail, she looked much more youthful. Zhang Yichen's eyes darkened. Instead of greeting Su Ching-sang, he nodded coldly. Chapter 561. Grandpa. Zhang Yichen was there, so Su Ching-sang couldn't ask what she wanted to ask. Can't I come to see you if I'm free? Yes. Of course. Old Master Hua smiled and said, if you don't come to accompany me, I can only talk to the parrot. You came just in time. I have a companion now. Grandpa, don't you have uncle to accompany you? Su Ching-sang wasn't surprised to see Zhang Yichen in the Hua mansion. Speaking of which, he really cared about the old master. Whenever he came to Rong City, he would come to accompany the old master. Zhang Yichen had helped him last time. She had told Hua Jinyao that she would treat Zhang Yichen to dinner, but they hadn't been able to see him since he returned to the army. Yes, Yichen is a good boy. Old Master Hua liked Zhang Yichen very much. He also had the heart to visit her whenever he came to Lin City. Su Ching-sang didn't know how to respond. He was older than her, so she just smiled at him. Uncle Ching suddenly appeared at the door and called out. Old Master, it's second Master Hua. The second master that Uncle Ching was talking about was naturally Hua Yangyuan. Hearing that, old Master Hua glanced at Su Ching-sang and said, you talk to your uncle for a while. I need to take a call. He left in such a hurry that he forgot that Zhang Yichen was about the same age as Hua Jinyao. Su Ching-sang was stunned. She didn't understand old Master Hua's sudden proposal. He glanced at Zhang Yichen. The parrot, which was not noisy a moment ago, was now silent. Zhang Yichen stood there and looked at her. Su Ching-sang felt a little embarrassed when she met his eyes. Thank you for last time. She was referring to the incident at the hospital. If Zhang Yichen hadn't shown up in time, she and Hua Jinyao wouldn't have been able to solve the problem. She would have suffered some losses as well. You're welcome. Zhang Yichen turned his face away on purpose. It's nothing. It's a small matter to you, but it's not a small matter to me. Su Ching-sang smiled. The gratitude in her eyes was very sincere. Last time, I told Jinyao that I would pick a time to treat you to dinner. You're welcome. It really isn't a big deal. Of course. Su Ching-sang wasn't an ungrateful person. How long are you going to stay in Rong City? Otherwise, Jinyao and I will be the host. Zhang Yichen finally turned around to look at her. Her eyes were clear and filled with pure gratitude. Also, the way she looked at him was as if she was looking at an elder. He knew this very well, but he could not hide the bitterness in the depths of his heart. I don't like to eat out. What Zhang Yichen said made Su Ching-sang look at him with confusion. Last time at your house, Zhang Yichen added, your aunt was a good cook. Then let's do it at home. Ms. Yu's cooking was really good, so Su Ching-sang didn't think too much about it. She was thinking of a time that would be convenient for everyone. Uncle, let's see if you're free these few days. You can also tell me what you like to eat. I'll go buy some groceries. Su Qingsang wanted to ask Mizu to buy the groceries. However, she was going to thank him anyway, so it would be more sincere if she said that she was going to buy groceries. I'll have to trouble you then. How is it troublesome? I'm the one who's troubling you. Zhang Yichen looked at her. She seemed to want to cut all ties with him, as if they had never known each other. It made him feel a little uncomfortable. He turned around, not looking at her, but at the parrot. Surprisingly, the parrot didn't speak. Su Qingsang didn't think too much about it. She took 2 steps forward and stood in front of the parrot. Hi, Jade. The parrot arrogantly turned its head, completely ignoring Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang was a little embarrassed. The last time she came here, the parrot had argued with her. Zhang Yichen was still here, but the parrot didn't give her any face. Zhang Yichen glanced at her and took a step to her side. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the parrot. At first, the parrot looked at Zhang Yichen, but the moment it saw Zhang Yichen raise his hand, the parrot screamed. I'm killing a bird. Help. Bird killing. Help. Su Qingsang was waiting for the parrot to say something, but she didn't expect it to say something like that. She was completely unprepared, so she laughed. That parrot was so funny, wasn't it? Who was going to kill her? She smiled brightly, and her eyes were curved. Zhang Yichen was standing next to her. From this angle, he only felt that her smile was so bright and beautiful, so attractive. Zhang Yichen lowered his eyes and restrained all his emotions. Su Qingsang also realized at that moment that she seemed to have forgotten herself. She turned around and looked at Zhang Yichen awkwardly. Uncle, I'm sorry. Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say at that moment. Before, when he didn't know Su Qingsang's identity, he didn't feel uncomfortable in front of her. However, ever since he found out her identity, he had a feeling that if he spoke to her more, he would bring trouble to her. His attitude was naturally different from when they first met. However, Su Qingsang now saw him as an elder, so she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. If Zhang Yichen behaved like he did when they first met, she would be afraid. She realized that it wasn't appropriate for her to stand with Zhang Yichen like this. She also remembered that there were guests here today, so she probably wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. Su Qingsang had to give up today. She would ask Old Master Huo when she had the chance. Uncle, I have something to do, so I have to go. Help yourself. After saying goodbye to Zhang Yichen, Su Qingsang was about to leave. Zhang Yichen didn't stop her, but after Su Qingsang took 2 steps, he suddenly said, I will still be in Rome City tomorrow and the day after. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment and turned around to look at him. For a moment, she didn't understand what Zhang Yichen meant. When she met Zhang Yichen's eyes, she seemed to suddenly understand. Then tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday, so Jinyao's company shouldn't be that busy. Okay. Zhang Yichen nodded. I will come over tomorrow night. Then it's a deal. After saying that, Su Qingsang nodded slightly and was about to leave. At that moment, the parrot behind her spoke again. Come over tomorrow. Come over tomorrow. Come over tomorrow. It was so loud that Su Qingsang almost got scared. She turned around and stared at the parrot. Come over tomorrow. I will come over tomorrow. The parrot was still calling. Su Qingsang felt embarrassed. She couldn't help but take a step forward. Stop calling. Shut up. However, the parrot wasn't afraid of her at all. It called a few more times. Zhang Yichen took a step forward again and glared at the parrot. His glare was much more intimidating. The parrot immediately stopped talking. It even took a few steps back, as if it was afraid of Zhang Yichen. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh when she saw the look in Zhang Yichen's eyes. "Thank you, uncle." She bowed and was about to leave. The moment she turned around, her ponytail got stuck in the button of Zhang Yichen's shirt. Su Qingsang's scalp tightened. She gasped. The pain stopped her in her tracks. Just now, she felt that the situation was a little awkward, so she turned around a little too quickly. She didn't expect something like this to happen. She took a step forward. Her scalp tightened again. "Don't move." The man's deep voice rang out. She didn't move. "Your hair got stuck in my button." Zhang Yichen took a step forward and explained in a low voice. Su Qingsang was about to say something. However, Zhang Yichen stopped her before she could. "Don't move. I'll untie it for you." Her hair was stuck in his button. If she turned around, the two of them would be too intimate. Su Qingsang realized it and didn't insist. It was a little awkward to stand there. "Thank you, uncle." Su Qingsang thanked him in a low voice. Feeling that Zhang Yichen was standing closer, he raised his hand and gently pushed her hair away. Su Qingsang didn't dare to move at all. The situation was a little awkward. She was a little embarrassed. She felt that every time she met Zhang Yichen, she would easily get into trouble. She waited for about 30 seconds. There was no sound behind her. She couldn't help but ask, "Are you done?" In Zhang Yichen's hand was the strand of hair that Su Qingsang had gotten stuck in his button. The faint fragrance smelled a little familiar. He remembered the smell. He had smelled it after Su Qingsang took a bath. "Uncle, are you done?" Su Qingsang waited for a long time. She couldn't help but ask again. "Yes." Zhang Yichen let go of her hair and took a step back. His well-trained body straightened up. "Thank you, uncle." Su Qingsang took a step back and looked down at Zhang Yichen. "I'm leaving. See you tomorrow, uncle." "See you tomorrow." Zhang Yichen looked into her eyes. "I'll be there on time." "Then, I'm leaving." Su Qingsang was really embarrassed. She had been so impolite in front of an elder several times. It was really embarrassing. She left, and the faint fragrance in the air once again disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yichen closed his eyes and turned his head sideways. He tried hard to smell the remaining fragrance in the air. But he quickly came to his senses. He raised his head and looked in a certain direction. It was the place where he felt someone was watching him last time. He narrowed his eyes and walked quickly to the place where he felt someone was standing. He looked around but didn't see anyone. He looked in the direction of the main house again. He knew that the elders of the Hua family were not at home today except for old Master Hua. Not everyone was free on the weekends. On the contrary, because of their identities, Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia were not at home on weekends. So who was standing here just now? Yichen. Old Master Hua had answered the phone and came out again. It was a nice day. He usually liked to play with the parrot here. "Uncle." Zhang Yichen walked up. Old Master Hua glanced at him and said, "Why are you over there? It's not time yet. There's nothing good to see in the garden right now. You'll have to come back later to see something good." "No. I'm just looking around." Chapter 562. Old Master Hua didn't notice that something was wrong with Zhang Yichen. He just pointed at Lian Dian with his mouth. "If you want to see the flowers, go to the greenhouse over there." That greenhouse was built by the old woman. She passed away later. Lu Tongjia loved flowers and plants, so she built a lot of them. There were more varieties in the greenhouse than when the old woman was there, and they were more delicate. Many of them were expensive. Speaking of which, Lu Tongjia didn't have any faults other than being too stubborn when it came to wood jinyao. Well, since you're here, let's have dinner together. I was going to ask Qing Sang to stay, but she said she had something to do and left. Old Master Hua couldn't help but look at Zhang Yichen. Yichen, you won't dislike an old man like me, right? Of course not. Zhang Yichen looked down with a gentle expression. He remembered that Su Qing Sang seemed to have something to say to old Master Hua when she came in. She wasn't in trouble again, was she? For some reason, he felt a little sorry for her. She seemed to be having a hard time after marrying Hu Jinyao. Zhang Yichen tried hard to suppress his concern for Su Qing Sang, but he couldn't help it at the last moment. It wasn't a good thing, not for her, not for him. Zhang Yichen pressed his lips into a straight line. When he met old Master Hua's eyes again, he had already suppressed his emotions. In the CEO's office of Tianyu Group. It was Sunday, so there was no one in the building. In the CEO's office on the top floor, Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang still had work to do. Hu Jinyao looked at the things he had arranged. Everything was going according to plan. He was quite satisfied with Yang Wenchang's workability. However, you mean, Su Peijian came to Rong City right after we did? After leaving the Hua family the day before yesterday, he asked Yang Wenchang to investigate Su Peijian's movements in the past few months. Su Peijian's activities were easy to find. In fact, she didn't try to hide anything. Hu Jinyao knew that she had taken over Xiang Caiping supermarket chain and was now the general manager. However, she had hooked up with Hu Yifan in the past month or so. The night they left the Hu mansion, Su Peijian followed Hu Yifan to his house. Yes. It was easy to find out when Su Peijian came to Rong City. Not long after Su Peijian and Xiang Caiping met, she came to Rong City. After that, she kept in contact with all the major suppliers. One of the suppliers, whose surname was He, had worked with Tianyu Group before. Therefore, through him, Su Peijian met an employee of the Tianyu Group. Then, through that employee, she finally managed to get in touch with Hu Yifan. Her methods are not bad. Hu Jinyao sneered, but his voice was not full of praise. Who would believe that Su Peijian didn't have an ulterior motive? President Hua, next, keep an eye on her and see who else she interacts with other than Hu Yifan. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded and thought of another person. What about Vice President Hu Yifan? Don't worry about him. Hu Jinyao sneered. He's in cahoots with Su Peijian. If you keep an eye on Su Peijian, you'll be keeping an eye on Hu Yifan. After giving his orders, Hu Jinyao decided to go home. It was a good weekend. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to talk about the company at home and cause Su Qing Sang to misunderstand, he would rather stay at home. After leaving the company, Hu Jinyao drove home. When he passed by a flower shop, he suddenly remembered something. Because Su Qing Sang and Li Qianxue had recognized each other, they had spent the New Year in Lin City. And the New Year was very close to Valentine's Day. He hadn't sent Su Qing Sang flowers yet. He stopped the car and bought Su Qing Sang a large bouquet of roses. When Hu Jinyao entered the house with the roses, he didn't expect to see someone in the living room who shouldn't have been there. Uncle. Why was he here? Hu Jinyao's eyes flashed with surprise. Su Qing Sang, who was in the kitchen, heard the sound and walked out. The first thing she saw was the large bouquet of roses in Hu Jinyao's hands. You're back. Su Qing Sang didn't get an answer yesterday, but she wasn't very disappointed. These were all things that she had expected. However, she still felt a little regretful. She wanted to resolve the conflict between Hu Jinniao and Lu Tongjia as soon as possible. If it could be resolved, it would be a good thing for them to get back together. But it didn't seem that easy at all. Su Qingsang had something on her mind, so she forgot about Zhang Yichen's visit yesterday. It wasn't until this morning that Zhang Yichen arrived, not long after Mizu bought the groceries. She remembered that Zhang Yichen said he would come over for dinner yesterday. This was embarrassing. Not only did she forget to tell Hu Jinniao that Zhang Yichen was coming, but she also forgot that he was coming. Su Qingsang was very embarrassed. To cover up her embarrassment, she asked Mizu to buy more groceries, while she went into the kitchen first. She put the rice in the pot and started to process the ingredients that Mizu had bought. She had just started when Hu Jinniao came back. Yes. Here, this is for you. Hu Jinniao didn't care that his uncle was still standing next to him. He directly put the large bouquet of roses in front of Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang was a little surprised. What day is it? Why did you suddenly think of giving me flowers? Can't I give my wife flowers on any day? Hu Jinniao held Su Qingsang's hand. My wife is so good. It's only right that I send you flowers every day. He was so talkative. Seeing him like this, Su Qingsang joked, maybe a flower shop is about to close, and you just happened to pass by. You don't believe me? Hu Jinniao narrowed his eyes and held her in his arms. Do you want me to buy a flower shop to give it to you? And let them send a bouquet of flowers every day from the beginning of the year to the end of the year? What do you think? Do you want to buy a clothing store so that I can wear new clothes every day? Next, there was a shop that sold bags and jewelry. Don't you think you should buy a street first? That's a good idea. Hu Jinniao agreed seriously. Why don't I accompany you to look around Rome City tomorrow? Let me know if you like any street. I'll buy it for you. What do you think? Crazy. That's right. I'm crazy for you. Hu Jinniao liked to tease her. He felt a sense of accomplishment when he saw her blushing and speechless. Su Qingsang glanced at him. When she was about to speak, she suddenly saw Zhang Yichen standing beside them. Seeing that Zhang Yichen had been staring at them, she suddenly felt embarrassed. Jinniao. Su Qingsang took half a step back and signaled to Hu Jinniao with her eyes. Stop it. It's okay. Uncle is one of us. Hu Jinniao really regarded Zhang Yichen as one of his own. He had participated in training with the army for a period of time. No matter how embarrassed he was, Zhang Yichen had seen him, so this idea was nothing to him. Su Qingsang didn't think that way. She asked Hu Jinniao to let go of her. I still have dishes to prepare in the kitchen. You guys talk first. She took half a step back from his arms and glanced at Zhang Yichen. Seeing that he was still staring at them, she explained to Hu Jinniao. We met Uncle yesterday. We haven't thanked him for what happened last time, so we invited him to dinner. Of course. After saying that, Hu Jinniao felt that something was wrong. Where did you meet Uncle? Rome City was so big. How could she meet him so easily? Last time she met him and this time. Su Qingsang was stunned. She didn't plan to tell Hu Jinniao about her visit to the Hu mansion. I'll go put the flowers in first. After saying that, Su Qingsang smiled at Hu Jinniao. Su Qingsang smiled at Hu Jinniao and went to find a vase to put the flowers in. Hu Jinniao walked to the sofa and sat down. He found a cup of tea in front of Zhang Yichen. It didn't look like it was freshly brewed. It seemed to have been there for a while. Uncle, you've been here for a long time. Yes. I'm off today. Hua Ji now nodded. Where did you meet Su Qingsang yesterday? The Hua mansion. Zhang Yichen didn't understand why he couldn't tell him. I went to see uncle and happened to see him. Why did Su Qingsang go to the Hua mansion? They had just been there the day before. Hua Ji now glanced in the direction where Su Qingsang disappeared. His eyes were deep, and he didn't look as relaxed as before. What are you doing? Why did you go out on the weekend? Zhang Yichen suddenly changed the topic. He didn't know if it was intentional or not. Hua Ji now didn't think about why Su Qingsang went to the Hua mansion. He started chatting with Zhang Yichen. Su Peijian was in a good mood when she left Hui Yifan's house in the morning. Everything was going according to her plan, and everything was going according to plan. She had successfully won Hui Yifan's heart. She had also won old Master Hua's favor. She wasn't stupid. She could tell that old Master Hua knew who she was. His attitude the day before wasn't because he really liked her, but because he wanted to give face to Hui Yifan. But that was enough for her. Even if old Master Hua only liked her 30%, she could make it 70%. As for Su Qingsang, even if old Master Hua liked her 100%, she would make it 30% or even nothing. Su Peijian didn't have a specific plan, but it didn't affect her good mood. As long as she entered the Hua mansion, she wouldn't have to worry about opportunities. There would be plenty of opportunities later. She didn't have to worry at all. But the most important thing now was to win Hui Yifan's heart. On the surface, she told Hui Yifan not to pursue the matter of her lying to him and using him. But when a man got angry, those things would become old scores that could be dug up at any time. Su Peijian decided to pick out a gift for Hui Yifan. Even if they were just using each other, she had to let him know that she was different from other women and other people. But Su Peijian didn't expect such a coincidence. She met Lu Tongjia. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.